If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
For those who work late night shifts or have spent working midnights in haunted locations, what's your paranormal encounter horror story that still gives you nightmares?
One night I was working in the transitional care unit. A long-term patient, Rose, who had been with us off and on for several months and had been losing her battle with metastatic lung cancer, was very chipper and happy to see me for meds. "Who have you brought to see me?" she almost sang. I checked to make sure my CNA hadn't followed me in, but I was alone. "Just me, Ms. Rose." She waved her hand. "No, who is that sweet little boy in the blue pajamas? He looks just like you." I felt cold all over. I had left my 16-month-old son in his new blue stars and moon-footed pajamas when I left for work that morning. I left the room quickly and called my parents, who were watching him that morning. I asked that they check on him. A few moments later, my dad comes to the phone out of breath. "He's fine now. We went in, and he didn't look like he was breathing, and he was pale, but your mom shook him awake. He's crying and asking for you." Rose died in her sleep 2 hours later. Trailwalker here. It's a job in wilderness therapy and primitive living/survival. It's also in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes we're in the dense forest, and sometimes we're in the desert. Either way, we have to gather our supplies, and the only technology we have is a radio and satellite phone in case of emergencies. Many things happen out there, and we all have stories. So I was assigned to this band of young troubled boys, aged 12 to 17. This one particular night there was a full moon, and we were camped in a forest, hours from civilization. The moonlight shone directly overhead, lighting the ground where the trees didn't cast shadows. As trailwalkers, we have night watch shifts while everyone else sleeps. I usually take the first shift because I'm an insomniac. It got a bit chilly halfway through my shift, so I decided to get in my sleeping bag and stare at the moon. None of us had tents, so I'm lying on a thin tarp on the ground. Most of the year we had fires, but due to the dry season we were on a fire restriction. Anyways, as I was lying there, I heard a rustling in the foliage coming from where one of the young boys was sleeping. I looked over, expecting him to just be moving around or something, but he was asleep, completely still in his sleeping bag. I heard the crunching of dead leaves as if someone had taken a step. Then, from out of the silhouetted shadows steps this tall, gangly humanoid into the moonlight. It was completely black and hazy, without facial features. It was extremely thin and I'd say it stood about 6 feet tall. It walked to the feet of the young man who was still asleep and began bending down, bringing its face closer to the teens. The creature's unnerving bend and its apparent resistance to gravity were unsettling. I felt a wave of dread wash over me. Then, almost instinctively, and with what little courage I could muster, I jumped to my feet, tearing out of my sleeping bag, and screamed as loud as I could at it. I startled it as it jumped back up straight and stumbled back into the shadows. I looked around, hoping to have awakened any one of the people I was with. Surprisingly, no one had awakened, which kind of annoyed me lol. I would have felt safer if someone was awake with me. Needless to say, I didn't sleep much that night, even when I woke up the next person for their shift. I never told anyone in the band, except for some colleagues, weeks later. I'm not going to state my theories on what it was or what could have happened. I am generally skeptical, and maybe I sound crazy, but I don't care. I've experienced enough out there to set me in my beliefs. This is one of many stories. Some of the stories involve similar entities, while others revolve around animals. Not all of the stories are scary, though. Some are simply spiritual and inspiring. I was working as a house supervisor, doing my paperwork at the end of my shift. I had my back to the door and saw, out of my peripheral vision, a black figure rush into the room and, behind me, into the bathroom that was in our office. The door slammed shut. It was about 15 minutes before my relief was due to arrive, and we wore black scrubs. I just thought the night supervisor had arrived early and really needed to take a crap or something. After about 5 minutes, I called out her name. "Hey Sarah, are you okay?" No answer. I sit there a few more minutes feeling uneasy, then the night supervisor arrives. And I am like, "You're not in that bathroom, are you?" "Nope," she says. I asked her if she would open the door with me and see if there was someone in there. We opened the door, and a rushing wall of heat, like opening up the door of an oven, slammed into us. Yep. Demon. I am confident in it. I'm a nurse on a ward for 33 Alzheimer's patients. During a quiet night shift, I was reading something at the nurse's post in the middle of the central hallway. It was the middle of the night, around 3 or 4, so even the restless patients were asleep. The lights were dimmed, and I was in an ADHD hyperfocus reading my book. All of a sudden I hear a faint children's voice singing a nursery rhyme, Alle Inge zwemmen in het water, or all the ducks are swimming in the water. No music, nothing was to be heard except this little child's voice singing this song in the dead of night. I checked the hallway left and right, there was nothing to see, and it was not really clear where the singing was coming from exactly. So I get my broad-shouldered 1.83 meters male body out of the nurse station and start walking around the ward searching for this creepy sound. I can't find it, and I'm starting to wonder if we really are living in a virtual reality world and if today is the day TV horror becomes real. And then I find it. We have a certain device that projects several touch games on a white surface table called the Tovertafel, or Magic Table. This device received maintenance that afternoon, and as a courtesy, the company activated all available games, one of them including a girl singing nursery rhymes to sing along with. 1979 I was working night shift as an LPN on a medical unit. I went for my RN the next year, an X-shaped unit with 1 PEDS and 3 medical wings extending from the central nurses station. The rooms were 4-bed, 2-bed, and single rooms. We would start at one end and work as a team together making rounds through medical, turning patients and making sure everyone was clean and dry, etc. By the time you finish the whole unit, it was time to do it all over again. A light came on in a 4-bedroom we had just been in not 20 minutes before. I went back to see what they wanted. A gentleman in bed 3 told me that the guy in bed 1, to the right of the door, had died. I said we just turned him, and he seemed okay at that time, and no sign of being near death. Sure enough, he was gone. Luckily a DNR, so no heroics. I asked the other patient what made him suspect he had died. Oh, 2 angels came and took him away, I watched them go. I had a friend who worked at a gas station mini-mart out in the woods for a few years. He worked the night shift, and usually nothing exciting happened. Just a lot of truckers on speed trying to make it to their next stop. He told me that one night he was alone, there were no cars in the parking lot, and something huge came up to the front door and started trying to open it. It was pulled to open, and whatever it was, he only tried pushing. After a few attempts, it stopped. My friend went to the door to investigate and saw nothing. No cars, no people, just silence and darkness. As he was going back to the counter, he started hearing scratches and noises around the building. The sounds began with scratches on the wall, and eventually he was hearing footsteps on the roof. He carried a rifle, so he went outside to look and didn't see anything. When he was going back inside, he heard a terrifying shriek from the rooftop. He said it sounded like a demon. He ran inside, locked the door, and sat there until morning with his rifle in his hands, staring out of the storefront. He's a big dude, 6 feet 7 inches, and at that time he was probably 300 pounds. He was armed, he knows how to use a weapon. He's not scared by anything. I've seen him overpower an Antifa protester as if they were made of paper mache, which they often are. He doesn't back down from anything. But he said he was absolutely terrified of the noise. He said that he went out the next morning and found scratches in the siding/paint on the siding leading up to the roof. Whatever the creature was, it hopped up on the larger garbage bins and then climbed to the roof after investigating the building. He does not know what the creature was, but it sounded bipedal and appeared intelligent enough to investigate the building. I would have been absolutely terrified. Definitely would have looked for another job. But out there are not many options. My cousin claimed that when she was working at a dollar store in an old mall, both customers and workers reported genuinely creepy shit. Usually it was things like someone unseen running down the aisle and pushing past people, or a black figure peeking around corners or zipping by so fast that people thought they were just seeing things. The creepiest by far was when one of the late-night stalkers was pulling out old unsold inventory from the shelves and replacing it with new or updated products, and I guess she squatted down to pull out bags of expired dog food, and when she got to the last bag and pulled it out, she was greeted by a gray dude's head sitting there, chin resting on the shelf. He had a big grin on his face, like he was trying to scare her for laughs. She instinctively fell backwards and hit her head on the inventory cart hard enough to need stitches. The manager thoroughly enjoyed explaining the coworkers' injuries to their superiors and the insurance company. I am not sure if he added that she was startled by a dead dude's head poking out behind the dog food with a creepy grin on his face. That story actually reminds me of the ghosts of Flight 41, where planes were built with materials from a fatal crash, and both flight staff and customers reported incidents of seeing the dead pilots and engineer in odd places in the planes. Like their head hiding amongst the luggage in the upper compartment, or their head appearing in a microwave and telling a staff member about a problem with the plane. Just creepy shit all around. Something about disembodied heads and other body parts is scary as hell to me. Why do they only appear as their heads? It's so unnerving. This event occurred a few years ago, and I still have no logical explanation for it. The following account is completely true to the best of my memory. I do rideshare for a living. The night this event took place was during a summer I was doing mostly airport rides at night. It was about midnight when I got the 45-minute plus ride pop-up. Score, I thought, as this will put me past what I set out to earn for the night, and I can go home and finally get some sleep. I pull up to the meeting point, and it's a professional-looking young lady in a business suit. I confirm her name, and she says, "Before I put my bags in, I have to warn you I live far and in the middle of nowhere. If you're not okay with that, I can get another ride." I say, "No worries, you're my last ride of the night." She hops in, and off we go. When she said middle of nowhere, she wasn't kidding. This was rural to the point it made most small towns look like NYC. A lot of nothingness, the odd streetlight every few miles, and occasional houses, fields, and farms. I drop her off, and she thanks me, handing me a very handsome cash tip. I thank her and turn off the rideshare app, as I decided I was done and will now head home. Open my map app, put in my home address, and set off for home. The first half hour was rather uneventful. I was going about 55 in the 50 with my windows down, high beams on, and music cranked. As I hit this winding curve in the road, I saw it and slammed on my brakes. I sat for a second in complete shock at what was in front of me. There is someone or something in a black hooded robe with the whitest non-branded sneakers crossing the road. It was taking its time. My immediate reaction was let it. At this point the hair on my arms and neck is standing straight up. Whatever this is, it is finally out of the road, and I punched the gas and hightail out of there. I finally got home and obviously couldn't sleep with what I just saw. Now this was a Tuesday at about 1 a.m. or so I highly doubt it was a random person out gallivanting. What was most disturbing and noteworthy was the fact that this thing never even budged or acknowledged me when I almost ran into it going 50+ miles per hour. If I were a person, I certainly would have reacted one way or another. I still don't know what I saw that night, but it vividly haunts me to this day. About 6 months before I began my tech position, a tragic medical emergency occurred on one of the hospital floors. A very young man undergoing routine thyroid surgery ended up eviscerating himself and hemorrhaging to death. One of the charge nurses I worked with was in that code. About a year later, one of my friends also started working as a tech on that floor. She told me about the strangest morning she had. A patient, an alert and oriented woman in her 50s, started screaming around 4 a.m. "Oh my God!" she screamed. My friend said she had just left the room a few minutes prior after getting her AM labs and vitals. My friend rushes into the room. The woman was saying, "Someone get him some bandages." My friend was like, "Who are you talking about? That man is walking around with a bloody neck. Why are you letting him walk around like that?" My friend responded, "There is no man walking around with a bloody neck." The woman insists she saw what she saw. I asked my friend if she was aware of the incident that occurred on her floor about a year and a half ago. She had never heard about it. As for me, I've never personally seen anything in the hospital, but this past summer something threw a piece of jewelry across my bathroom. It was 11 a.m. on a sunny weekday morning. I'm finishing my hair and makeup and am about to head to the grocery store. Husband was at work, kids at school. One of my rings goes flying across the bathroom. It hit the side of the sink, and I quickly dove for it before it slid down the drain. I keep my jewelry in a little decorative copper plate in my bathroom. I set the ring back on the plate, and it alone started darting around, as if a magnet was underneath the plate moving it. There were several other pieces of jewelry on this plate. None of them moved. Just this one ring. I slap my hand down on it to stop it. As soon as I lift my hand, it darts around the plate one more time and then stops. I haven't seen anything like it ever since. This happened to my husband. I was waiting for him in the car in this scenario. This was his first full-time job, and it was housed in a building that had previously been a convent. People joked about ghosts. He said the vibe was weird but hadn't personally witnessed anything. One evening, he realized he had left a file in his office and needed to retrieve it. This was around 10 p.m., so the office had been closed for over 5 hours. He had a key and decided to get the file. I was sitting in the car for a few minutes, and he suddenly came running out, slammed the car door, and said, "Go." We tore out of the lot. All of the offices were on a long corridor, and each had a door. All doors were open. His was midway down the hall. He grabbed his file and exited his office. Once in the hall, the very last office door at the far end of the hall slammed shut on its own. No one was in the building. No vents going, old radiator heat. He watched that door briefly, and then suddenly, all of the doors began slamming shut in order, starting with the furthest ones but working their way down the hall toward him. He blasted out of there. Never, ever went back into that building unless it was business hours. I worked a day job and a night job, and I was in college, so my sleep schedule was really ducked up for several months. One night, I was working alone. I did my work and had a few hours of downtime, so I tried taking a nap. I woke up to what sounded like someone inside the building, screaming nonsensically, and smashing things. Like some psycho broke in and was tearing up the room. I ran to where the sound was coming from, and by then it had stopped. I didn't see anything weird inside the room, everything was perfectly normal. I yelled, "What the duck was that?" My own voice came out very slow and deep, like when you try talking through a yawn. "What's going on?" Same thing. I looked around the other rooms and even outside. Nothing was out of order. I'm confident it was a hallucination due to lack of sleep. After that I took steps to sort my life out so I could sleep like normal again, and I haven't had any more experiences like that. When we moved into the cabin in 2014, everything was great. We loved the little place, we loved the location, and we loved the community. In late 2016, we were getting a new stove, so we put the other up on the community page. A lovely couple who lived less than a quarter mile away came to pick it up. It was after that everything changed. When I woke in the night, I started to see an older girl, late teens, standing between our bedroom door and our bathroom. She was fully dressed and had a black appearance, including black hair, but her features were still distinguishable. It wasn't merely a shadow or a black void. And she taunted me every single night. At first, I thought I was crazy. Then I finally broke down and told my husband. He's never seen her. Fast forward almost a year, and those folks who bought the stove made a quick disappearance from their newly bought home they were renovating. We had zero idea what happened, we just figured life. We ended up selling because of the girl. She was draining my energy. My husband said I became a person he didn't know. In 2024, while watching The Dead Files, my old tiny town was mentioned in the show. We had zero idea about any of it. Season 4, Episode 9, if you are curious. It seems the entire town was built on cemeteries of some sort. The town was built over various cemeteries, including indigenous burial grounds and old Revolutionary War plots, which primarily involved the relocation of headstones. Their home was built directly on the Revolutionary War burial ground, and they left due to the severity of the hauntings. Both individuals later developed cancer. And our home was across from an old indigenous burial ground. I spent the entire episode feeling both vindicated and horrified. Just talking about her makes me nervous because I'm afraid she will somehow feel me and summon herself back. I worked in a nursing home. It was late at night, and we went around checking that the patients were safely tucked in their beds. Patients are meant to stay in bed or buzz us if they need to use the washroom. I was making my rounds and went past a room that was meant to be empty, but there was a person sitting in with our patient. I nodded. As long as the family is quiet, there's no problem staying later. My lady told me the next day her husband had been by to visit. I said that's nice, etc. Didn't think anything of it until I mentioned to my supervisor maybe her husband might come by again this evening. She said, "I hope not, he has been dead quite a while." Still no idea to this day who was in the chair by the bed. I was a third shift supervisor at a lockdown facility. The place was allegedly built around Native American land, and the old superintendent's house was said to be haunted. Part of the third shift's responsibilities was going around all the outlying buildings to make sure everything remained secure. One night one of my workers came in from having done the security checks. He told me that he had talked with the guy at the warden's house and everything seems legit. I stopped in my tracks. No one lived there. The place was used as state overflow storage. I asked him again what happened. He said he pulled up and there were flickering lights, like a TV was going, and he went up to the door. Knocked. Talked with the guy who said he was maintenance and allowed to live there. I told him absolutely not. Being the supervisor, it fell to me to go check this out. I legitimately thought it was just someone, unhoused, who had found a place to stay. About 50 yards from the house was the old youth center that was known to have thieves break in to steal copper. Thought it was that. No matter what, I had to go and check. I made my employee go with me. We drove up to the house, and it was pitch black. No cars around. We couldn't see anyone. I shined my flashlight into the windows. No sign of anything. Knocked on the door. No answer. Used my master key to get in. There was absolutely no sign anyone had been in recently. The electricity didn't work. He pointed to where he saw the flickering lights. No TV in the room, no lamps. Nothing. You know how you can go into an empty house and just feel that it's been abandoned? It felt like that. Dust on the ground, undisturbed, a heavy, heavy silence. At this point he was scared to death. I made him walk with me up the old stairs and clear all the rooms. We found nothing. No sleeping bags. Nothing looked like it had been moved or ripped out. On my way out of the house, I saw this little doll that had been tossed on a random filing cabinet. I knew that this story would get passed around because we were all nothing if not gossips, so I placed the doll in the front window with her hand up as if it was waving, just to scare the next person who came around. The inpatient hospice house I worked at used to be a children's psychiatric hospital. There were many wild things that happened while I worked the night shift. One of the patient rooms, always the same one, would call a random nurse's desk. There wouldn't be a patient in that room. It happened a few times while I was there. The first time it happened to a nurse, she came down and asked me to go help the patient in that room with the phone. I told her we didn't have a patient in that room, and she made me come sit with her on the other end of the building because she was scared. On another occasion, a different nurse responded to the call. The person said, "This is Derek, I need help," so she came down and asked me to go help Derek. We told her we didn't know what she was talking about. Then one of the times it happened to me. I answered the phone, and the person on the other end asked me to come to check on them. I had my coworker come with me because we knew there was no patient in that room. When we went in, the air was so thick, and we immediately got goosebumps. Then there would be times we'd see weird things out of the corners of our eyes, and shortly after that a patient would pass or be gone when we went to check on them. Once we saw a flash of light over kind of by the door that led to the balcony. It basically looked like a glare. We went to do rounds, and a patient a few rooms past that door was gone. The nurse had just checked on him a few minutes before we saw the light, and he was alive. On another occasion, we cared for this patient for about a month. She was miserable and seemed ready to pass for some time before she finally did. There were several days when we finally made her comfortable, during which we thought she might pass, but she held on for about a week longer. So one morning we are talking to her sister in the hallway, and out of the corner of my eye I see what looks like a small black ball rolling on the floor into the room. I didn't say anything because I thought what I saw was just a trick of my eyes. As soon as the sister went back into the room, my coworker was like, "Did you see that black thing?" We thought it was weird but didn't think anything of it. The patient finally passed that morning. I had to travel late at night for a conference the next day. I live in the mountains, and my route took me down a ridiculous switchback. The turns to and fro were harrowing. Unfortunately, a lot of logging trucks use this route, which makes it even more unnerving, but thankfully only during daylight working hours. That is why I was so surprised to find a large truck right on my bumper, making every maneuver I did, but silently. No grinding downshifting gears, no air brakes, just bright lights right behind me making each hairpin turn way too close to me. This truck just came out of nowhere. I was really frightened. It was deer season, and if one leapt out in front of me, and I had to stop, or couldn't, this truck and I were going to go over the edge of the mountain. Then I reached the second to last turn, and the bright headlights right behind me disappeared. No truck. Mind you, there are no turnoffs, no driveways, and no truck areas. You start the slalom, and you are trapped until you finish driving it. But this giant truck just vanished in the middle of a curve. I was so shaken that I had to pull over once I reached the end and flat road once again. This isn't my story, but it happened to my brother. Here's what happened. Back in the 90s, my brother had a summer job at a local bowling alley. He was saving up to buy a car. He was pretty young at the time, so this was a great gig for him. Part of his job was to clean the place after hours. That meant making sure all the chairs were pushed in around the bar tables and the bowling balls were lined up in order by weight on the racks, stuff like that. He'd been working there for about a month with no issues. One morning, while he was cleaning, he worked early to get everything ready for the evening leagues. The PA system suddenly came on with a man's voice. He couldn't make out what the voice was saying, but he definitely heard it. It creeped him out a bit, but he figured maybe someone else had come into the building without him noticing. So, he walked through the entire place to check. Nothing. It was completely empty, and everything was still locked up. At that point, he started to feel a little uneasy, but he went back to work. A bit later, while he was out on the main floor, he heard the sound of pool balls breaking, like someone had just taken a shot at one of the pool tables. He immediately turned around and looked over toward the pool area. And there was no one there. Not a single person. That was it for him. He called home. He was still living at home since he just graduated high school, and asked our dad to come down because he didn't want to be alone in the building anymore. He ended up finishing his shift, but from that point on he never felt comfortable working there again, for obvious reasons. Strange stuff kept happening now and then, though nothing quite like that day. He finished out the summer, but he did not return when the next year rolled around. Yeah. He didn't go back. Friend's first paranormal encounter. Hello all, I am sharing this at a friend's request, hoping to receive any feedback or advice regarding this encounter. I have offered my friend feedback from my previous experiences, but I have never experienced this. I am hoping someone else here may have and can shed some insight. My friend, 25, male, is a private security officer, and he recently had his first encounter with a spirit at one of his job sites. On Saturday, October 18th, he was working as a security officer at a retirement home for wealthy residents. He was sitting at his desk when a lady, who he states to have been at least 70 years of age or older, peeked her head through the half door and asked him if he could unlock her door, as she forgot her keys inside. He asked her to give him a moment, and he grabbed the keys and entered the elevator with her. Upon entering the elevator, he states that she asked him, in what he describes as a creepy manner, what his name is. He says that he tried to make a joke, saying, "I don't have a name, I'm nobody." She then gave him what he describes as the creepiest smile he has ever seen, followed by her saying in a strangely deep voice, "Well, that's no help. That's not useful." They rode the elevator in silence, and when they got off, he walked her to her door, unlocked it, and opened it for her. At that point, all he saw inside was a tarp, 3 coat hangers in the closet, and a lone chair in the living room. He let her walk in, and as soon as she entered, she turned and asked him to grab the chair for her. He said no, explaining that he couldn't do that, and she then asked if she could bring the chair near the door for him to retrieve it. He said no once again, stating that he's not allowed to enter to grab anything, as it would be a violation of his contract. She then said that she didn't want to get him fired and proceeded to turn and walk further inside. He said goodbye, she returned the sentiment, and then he walked back to his post downstairs. He arrived at his post downstairs, checked his book for contact information regarding the situation, and found a note instructing him not to let anyone into room 501. Which was her room that he had just been to. He says his heart went to his stomach and he got a weird feeling. 6 hours later, his relief came in, and they were talking about the situation that had occurred when his relief came out, saying that the lady in that room had passed away less than a week prior to the incident my friend experienced. My friend described the appearance of the lady that he assisted, and his relief confirmed that the description 100% matched the lady who had passed away. My friend is wondering what exactly he experienced and is curious as to why the spirit asked for his name and then proceeded to act in a seemingly creepy/malicious way. I assume that it may be the spirit could be confused with the situation, but I have had experiences where malicious entities have asked for my name or knew my name, so I hope for the best that such wouldn't be the case. I am hopeful that someone here can provide some insights into this matter. Thanks in advance from the both of us. Nothing too creepy, just weird. I worked in the basement of an old building, probably built around the turn of the century. The building had been sold, and everything above the basement was empty. We were working there temporarily. The elevator was supposed to be locked off, not going any further than the lobby, but occasionally, even though you would press the button to go down to the basement or up to the lobby, the elevator would take you up to the top of the building, which was the 7th floor. It wouldn't stop at any other floor, just the 7th. Then the doors would open to a huge empty room, dusty and scattered with boxes and old office furniture. Depending on the time of year, it could be quite dark when the doors opened, making it even creepier. It only happened to me a handful of times, but it was scary because you didn't know what you'd see when the doors opened. I never saw anything. Oddly, such incidents only happened to people when they were alone in the elevator. I wasn't the only one. It was an old, slow, creaky elevator too, so it took a while to get up to the 7th floor, which made my heart beat a little faster in anticipation of that door opening. My work location has paranormal experiences. I began this job as a contracted employee working in human resources. My first experience was being sent to our warehouse, several buildings away. Off I trek, and I get lost, of course. I am walking down this hallway, and mind you, it's got windows to the side, so it is bright and sunny, but I feel this uneasy feeling, as if I am not alone. I shake it off as just being new and uneasy. This is a scientific laboratory company, and one cannot go from the labs back into refrigerators, cold rooms, or walk-in freezers due to our protocols. It was late in the day, and none of the scientists were clean, so they asked me to go into the walk-in freezer to get a kit for them. I had never been in this refrigerator. It was pretty large. I didn't notice if it had a back door. I know now that there is one way in and out, one door. As I am reaching up to this top shelf, I feel this tap on my left shoulder. I turn around expecting to see this guy, Larry, who was a real funny guy and might pull a prank like that, sneaking up on someone. I turn around, and no one is there. Oh, I think they must have gone out the back door. I learned that there is no back door. What the heck? Well, I work with these really rational scientists, and I'm pretty logical in my workday life, but I do believe in otherworldly phenomena, so I was a bit shook. I kept it to myself, trusting one scientist who then told others. I hate gossip, but this proved rather interesting, as I then became the collector of all the other tales from this place. My list is 20 years in the making. Some folks teased me as the Casper Keeper and Ghost Whisperer. But then they would listen to the stories and get rather silent. This is a spooky story about working the night shift. First off, I haven't worked nights in over a year. It's an honor to be back among you vampires. Being here now made me reminisce on the last night shift I worked, where I nearly pissed myself. This is that story. Background: this is a forested residential HOA, with barely any street lamps. It was approximately 11:30 p.m. I had been on shift since 10 o'clock. I jumped in the company patrol vehicle to go patrol the neighborhood after a nice Sopranos binge-watching session. I first went down to one of the residential park areas to sit and deter incidents. I was exhausted and didn't feel like driving. I had my window down, sitting there for 10 minutes, when all of a sudden I heard stomping noises, similar to running, which sounded like it was getting closer. Oh, duck no. I threw the car in drive and quickly spun around to face the direction the footsteps were coming from. Nobody was there, surprisingly. I then proceeded to leave the park immediately and begin driving again. I did a full lap around the property before seeing a local schizophrenic man, who I've run into before on day shift, walking in the roadway. He startled me because I was cresting a hill, and he practically popped up in front of me, and his appearance was an all-black outfit, greasy long black hair, black Bose headphones, and pale skin. He stopped in his tracks and gave me a stare that was reminiscent of Jason from Friday the 13th. I continued driving, turning around at the first cul-de-sac I could find to attempt to make contact, part of my job. When did I come back around? He had disappeared, nearly into thin air. I had only been gone 20 seconds. How is this possible? I asked. I was perplexed by this. Thinking he had bolted, but even then, he wouldn't have gone that far. At this point I was pissing myself. Someone had just disappeared into thin air. He could be anywhere, and I didn't know if he was a threat to me or others. That night I was watching over my shoulder, checking every single parking lot I sat in, and had my flashlight in my lap the whole time I used the company vehicle. I never saw him again after that. When I was in high school, I took part in a program that paired two seniors with a group of freshman students to get them used to it. We occasionally participated in activities, which made the experience enjoyable and allowed us to earn an easy credit. No-brainer course. One of the kids in my group just happened to be my neighbor. We shared a wall of the duplex we lived in and spent our free time outside of school together. I literally set his shoe on fire one time at his request because his foot was cold. It was winter, there was snow, and we were careful. Several years pass, and this young person and I find ourselves employed at the same retail establishment. Since we've known each other for a while, we'd always speak and joke around. One of the jokes ended up being we'd hold hands and jump out of the break room window together, because working retail does in fact suck, and dark humor helps. Unfortunately, this young man ultimately took his own life. Fortunately, he did not take his own life at work. So probably a few years after he passes, a woman starts working at the store in a different department, but we all share a break room. We were friendly, but I'm not a super social person, but one day she asked me if the store was haunted, so I immediately told her about Bob and his shenanigans, and she said something along the lines of, "Yeah, I was wondering about that, but what about the break room? I keep seeing a young kid staring out of the window," she said, prompting me to explain who he was and why he was there, as it couldn't possibly have been anyone else she was seeing. I reiterate. Those two did not work together at any time. He had passed before she ever applied, let alone got hired. Up until she asked me, nobody had talked to her about him. She could not have possibly known about him or what happened. I had a patient die on hospice and assisted living. The whole week after his death, the elevator kept stopping on his floor, and the doors would get stuck open at night when all the residents were in bed and the aides and I were riding down to the office to give a report to the oncoming third shift. The last night it happened, after the elevator trick, my cordless phone started ringing in my pocket, and the caller ID showed it was his bedroom phone. He was in a single room, which we had locked due to waiting for his family to come retrieve his belongings. When I answered the phone, it was weird static. I got the master keys, went up to his floor, opened his room, and walked in and firmly said, "Mr. X, you're dead. You were a wonderful man, and we really enjoyed you while you were alive, but you were 96 and hung on for 3 weeks longer than we all thought you had in you. It's time to rest." And you're scaring the aides with that elevator nonsense. It stopped after that. I have 2 stories from friends of mine who worked in retail. Story 1, the convenience store. One friend worked at a convenience store where the stockroom and personnel break room were said to be haunted. Years earlier, an employee had died there in his sleep and never woke up. According to my friend, the man's spirit still lingered, often appearing faceless but still in uniform. Near the stockroom, there was even a small altar with flowers, candles, and saint images, set up by the manager to appease the spirit and pray for him to move on. But despite that, the ghost would still appear, sometimes startling employees who entered alone. My friend only lasted a few weeks at the job because he kept encountering the spirit and couldn't take the constant fear. Story 2, the bookstore. Another friend worked at a well-known premium bookstore in the city, which had 5 floors, including a basement. The staff there had many stories about different hauntings. On the first floor, by the back entrance, some night guards claimed to witness a kind of residual haunting, the stabbing of a former warehouse employee during a fight years ago. They didn't see the actual ghost, but the violent scene would replay itself at times. On the second floor, in the kids and teens section, multiple spirits were said to wander: a little girl in a white dress, a young boy, and an old man. The young boy and the old man are always seen wearing rural/farmer clothes and would be spotted walking together, sometimes in between the shelves or on the main path. On the fourth floor, employees spoke of a shapeshifter spirit that mimicked staff members. Because of this, during closing time, employees would quickly shut off lights and rush down to the first floor. Nobody wanted to linger up there in the dark. The third floor, I believe, is the safest since there were no cases or any accounts of ghostly encounters. I'm intrigued and curious. I used to work at an old McDonald's in a rural area. I usually worked the night shifts. One night during my shift I was working alone. That night a creepy old lady appeared in the drive-thru by the outside menu where people order. Also, when I say creepy, I mean she had this weird big smile on her face, and she had frizzy black and white hair. I forgot to mention her eyes. She had black, dead-shot eyes. As I was saying, she came up to the drive-thru. She wasn't in a car, just standing there. I was a little freaked out. I had no idea what she was doing. I was just watching her with the outside camera. Eventually she turned around and just walked in the forest by the McDonald's. I didn't see the woman for the rest of the night, and when my manager arrived the next morning, I explained everything to her. However, she didn't seem to care, believe me, or think it was serious. The next night I was working my shift as usual, but my manager was also staying there late because she had extra work to do. Later that night the creepy old lady was there, at the drive-thru again. I watched in horror as a few minutes passed, and then she turned her head to face the camera. It felt as if her pitch black eyes were staring into my soul, and her smile was anything but normal. Then her smile gradually faded into a deep frown, and she spoke just one word: my name. I ran into my boss's office and dragged her to the camera by the window, and my boss and I saw the lady and the tree line facing the woods. Then she slowly turned around, smiled, and walked into the forest. At that point my boss and I were panicking about what to do, so we ended up calling the police, but when they arrived, all they ended up doing was having me give them a description of what the lady looked like and then escorting us home. I ended up quitting that job, and my boss understood why and gave me the best of luck and told me to stay safe. That was 2 years ago. I'm now 23, and about a day ago, I was watching the news when I learned that somebody who worked the night shift at the same McDonald's where I used to work was apparently ended. Before he died, he reportedly kept saying strange things about a lady and repeatedly showed up at the drive-thru during a shift. I suspect his death has something to do with that old lady I saw 2 years back, but honestly I'm just glad whatever happened to him didn't happen to me. I used to work at a family entertainment center that included a laser tag facility, along with an arcade and other family fun things. Everyone consistently discussed the location as being haunted, and I was initially skeptical, as I generally do not believe in paranormal phenomena. Until I started working in the laser tag facility. Now if you've ever played laser tag, you know it's black lights, so of course when the black and white lights are off, it's pitch black. Like, can't see your hand in front of your face dark. Of course we don't play in the dark, but it's important to note. We worked alone at the laser tag section, and we were responsible for explaining the rules in room 1, helping people get vested up in their gear in room 2, and then having to referee in the arena. So there are 3 different sections to this part of the facility as well as a small office, where I spent a lot of time. The office was inside room 2, just across from the door that led to the arena. Also, the arena had back doors that led to the back of the parking lot. These doors remained locked from the inside at all times but in case of emergency could be used, important for a later incident. My first incident was my first night closing alone. One of the laser tag vests, which had been out of order all day, and was 100% properly sitting on the rack, came flying up and over the rack, into the floor, ripping the charger from it and causing the vest to kick on. That scared the hell out of me. The second incident was Halloween 2013. Working with a coworker this night because it was busy, I was in the office checking vest battery levels while my coworker was outside running the register. There were no games going on, so all the rooms were empty. I heard what sounded like someone running up the ramp towards the vesting room, where the office is also located, and I looked at the door to the arena, fully expecting it to burst open and someone to run through. The footsteps stop, and it goes silent, then there's a loud bang. I jumped and screamed and ran to get my coworker. He opened the door, and we found a shoe on the floor that definitely was not there before. Also, we never found the other one, so that still bothers me when I think about it. Another incident was one night, 2 of our regulars were at the facility for their bowling league. Their kids wanted to play laser tag. I don't remember their exact ages, but at the time I'd say the girl was about 5 or 6, and the boy was probably 7 or 8. It was just the 2 of them, and they asked me if I would play too. I agreed, and we went into the arena to play. Midway through the game, the girl pops the corner, and I notice her vest is turned off, which can't happen unless it's done by the computer in the office. Then the music stops, so of course I flip shit and think the lights are going next. I was so sure someone was in the office who wasn't supposed to be. I ran out, threw the office door open, and the computer had crashed. Never happened before. I call the kids in to reset the game, and the little girl says she's scared and doesn't want to play again. I told them okay and that I would refund their parents. I was helping her get the laser tag vest off when she said, "Hey, I have a question." I asked what it was, and she said, "Who was the man in there playing with us?" There was no man in there, it was just me, 19-year-old female, at the time and the kids. I told her there wasn't anyone else in there, and she said yes there was, she could show me. She grabs my hand, walks me to the door, and opens it, points up on the ramp, and says, "See, he's right there." I told her I didn't see anything, and she goes, "How can you not see him? His hair is glowing." I work mostly on the 3 to 11 shift. I see him when I have to go to the copy room located over by the front lobby and behind the chapel. Almost every time I visit the copy room at night, I feel uneasy. Third shift is even worse, as there are fewer people around. And I do have cause for concern, as I'm not the only person who has seen him. By him, I see a tall, thin guy dressed either like an old-fashioned undertaker or an Orthodox Jewish man. Where I work, the owners are an Orthodox Jewish family. He also wears a black top hat of sorts. The front lobby and the chapel are in the older section of the home. They have the lights dimmed at night when they lock the front door at 8 p.m. He's never tried to hurt me, which is great, but whenever I see him, it's usually a given that someone either has passed away or is about to. It is still unnerving to see this ghostly apparition, I guess you would call him. I've also seen other things as well, but he's the one I've seen most often. Has anyone else had any experiences while at work, particularly at nursing homes? I worked the night shift at a small boutique hotel, which had previously been a shady truck stop style motel, an AIDS hospice, and a generally unseemly place. During the night shift, the only people on staff were me and the bartenders, who worked on the other side of the property. The front desk and lobby where I worked were carved out of a couple of rooms in the largest of the property's buildings. The back office area was a room that opened directly into the lobby, and then through a door in the back was a small room with a desk and bathroom in it. That night the front desk area, which always was cold, kept heating up with this hot, stuffy air. The AC unit was right outside the office door, and I could hear it running. The temperature gauge in the room read in the low 70s, and when I checked the vents, it felt like it was blowing cool, but every once in a while the hot air would pass through the room. I wasn't too bothered since ACs act up all the time, and there was an old attic above the rooms that might trap heat, so I just brushed it off. But, as the night went on, I started to get really strong feelings of uneasiness. Going in and out of the smaller room with the bathroom, I'd feel like someone was right behind me. I'd turn around, and nothing would be there. By the end of my shift I felt completely unnerved. Between the blasts of heat and the feeling of being watched all night, I couldn't get out of the office fast enough. The following day, upon arriving at work, I inquired with my supervisor whether any unusual incidents had ever occurred in the lobby area. Without skipping a beat, she said, "Oh, yeah, there was a fire in here when this place was still a motel. The manager's room was the back room, and one night he was smoking in bed, fell asleep, and the bed caught fire. He didn't get out and ended up dying in the fire in the room. During the renovations to repair the damage, they merged the back room and the manager's room into this office." And that's how I learned the hotel was haunted. Death during night shift. This happened back in 2018. I was a nursing student practicing my last year of nursing school on a medical ward for adult/older adults. I had been training with my mentor for day shifts, but I had one night shift on my schedule. Earlier during the start of my night shift, I noticed that there was one patient who appeared to be heavily sedated. I was not assigned to take care of him, but my mentor was. She explained to me that he was on palliative care, which was why he was heavily sedated. This was something beyond my scope of practice as a student to learn at that point in my practice. Around the time of 12 a.m., my mentor and I were doing rounds on our patients, and we checked on our palliative care patient. Unfortunately, we had discovered that he had passed away sometime during the night. My mentor called the doctor and proceeded with the hospital protocol to bag his body and transfer him to the morgue. Something the nurses had to do at night themselves due to the lack of extra staff that would be on for the days. This was my first experience with a deceased patient as a nursing student, so I was optimistic to help my mentor and learn what to do in this case. We had a porter come up with a stretcher and body bag. The three of us put him into the body bag, and then we were all going to transfer him over from his bed to the stretcher. The other two were at the head and foot ends of the bag, and I was the one pulling it onto the stretcher. As we finished moving the body bag onto the stretcher, for some reason I turned around, and I will never forget this. I saw this black mass coming towards me quite fast, and once it was in front of my face, it disappeared. What was most bizarre from this experience was the fact that I felt a rush of air from the mass coming towards my face and then disappearing, the same feeling as though someone was running past you and they carried a rush of air behind them hitting your face. No one in that room saw what I saw, and I didn't tell my mentor, and I kept thinking about it as we went down to the morgue together with the body. That night, I distinctly felt and saw something unusual, and until now, I have never written about it. Thank you for listening to this story. I am now a full-time registered nurse, and I do not work at that ward, as I have specialized in a different specialty in nursing. This story is near and dear to my heart, as I always believed in the paranormal and ghosts, and up until then I had not had a paranormal experience. Love this community, keep sharing. Night shift. The building has 15 floors, and each floor requires a fob to access the elevator, as each floor contains a private business office. Around 2 to 3 a.m., the elevator would arrive at our floor without anyone having called it. While I was about 10 feet away from it, only 2 to 3 of us were in the building at night, and all were accounted for. This occurrence happened multiple times, and we held our breath each time we heard the doors ding and swing open, knowing that no one should be able to access our floor. Security swore that the elevators could not randomly run to the floors without a call. We continued to report it as we thought it was a mechanical malfunction. One night, I entered the elevator intending to go down to the first floor, but no other floors lit up. As the doors completely shut, the arrow switched to up despite my downward direction, and when the doors opened, I found myself in complete darkness. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I was pressing the elevator buttons and using my key fob to try to go to my floor or exit on the first, but nothing happened. I panicked when the doors suddenly shut, and the elevator took me back to my floor instead of the first, so I decided to take the stairs down. The whole time my spidey sense was telling me something was off. This building used to be a big bank, it still had the vault in the basement, and then security told me, "We call him the banker, he carries the money from the floors to the vault, and we see him sometimes in his black suit and hat walking down the halls." I took the stairs after that. I work in IT at a faith-based nursing home. I've worked here 10 years, so I've seen and heard a lot. Here are some highlights. Before IT, I worked in dietetics. I was washing dishes in a satellite kitchen by myself, around 3:30 to 4 in the afternoon, when I heard someone call my name over the noise of the dish machine. For those not familiar with commercial-grade dish machines, they are loud. I looked around, but no one was there. I shrugged it off and went back to work. A few minutes later I heard my name again. I turned the dish machine off and started walking towards the door to see if someone was messing with me. I got to the center of the room, and I heard a loud bang. Like someone banging on a wall, but the walls were all cinder block. Then I heard my name whispered in my ear, and there was a pounding on the wall. It sounded like someone was pounding on a door with both hands. The pounding was moving along the wall of the room. It started by the door, then went behind the dish machine, then onto another wall. I stood in the center of the kitchen, following the sound with my eyes. Once it got to the middle of the wall across from the door, I bolted out of there. I sprinted through the halls back to the main kitchen, and I refused to work in that satellite kitchen alone ever again. I soon transferred to IT. I used to share an office with one of the maintenance guys. He came into the office one afternoon and said how Mr. Old Dude is looking a lot better today. Mr. Old Dude was very sick for a long time. I stared at him for a minute. He is not the type to joke, especially about a dead guy, and said, old dude died 2 days ago. I just finished processing his discharge from the system. He didn't believe me, so I showed him the death notice. He went white as a sheet and told me he had just ridden up the elevator with him. He said old dude responded, "I'm feeling pretty great," when my coworker told him he looked great. This will be my last story, and it's the scariest. We built a new skilled nursing building in 2010. It is rumored to be cursed. The maintenance elevator is extremely uncomfortable to be in at times. Bangs and scrapes on the wall are often reported, even when the elevator is stationary. I avoid that elevator entirely, but I was transporting a large toolbox and preferred not to ascend 5 flights of stairs at 3 a.m. I was with a security guard who was carrying a 10-foot ladder for me. It was a particularly loud ride, with lots of scratching and banging. It was also taking a very long time. The security guy made a comment about us never getting to the 4th floor. The elevator slowed to a stop, and the doors opened. We should have seen a wall with a quilt. Instead, we were staring into darkness. It was pitch black outside of the elevator. I couldn't tell you how long we stared into the darkness before I grabbed a screwdriver out of my toolbox, but it was long enough that the doors definitely should have closed. I tossed the screwdriver out of the elevator, and it sounded as if it hit tile flooring. Our hallways are carpeted. Then I heard a roar, like the Tyrannosaur's roar from Jurassic Park. It sounded really far away. I don't know if the security guard heard that. He's older, and it was almost too faint for me to hear. But then the doors closed. The elevator started moving, and when the doors opened, we were on the 4th floor. We both jumped off the elevator and just stood at the end of the hall for a while. When he finally looked at me, he said, "Don't talk about that. Ever." I said okay, and we got back to work. I avoid that elevator like the plague now. Unfortunately, sometimes I still need to use it, but nothing strange has happened besides the scratches and banging that we're all used to. Years back I was doing boiler checks inside an old singleman's hostel, homeless/houseless folks. It had been closed for 3 years, originally opening in the 80s. Anyways, I learned of many bad things that occurred there over the years. One time I heard screaming coming from the opposite end of the building basement. It was in the afternoon on a weekday. It sounded like a man getting ended or dying in pain. Building's empty, just me. I did a walkthrough an hour prior as part of my company's daily checklist. I think I was likely hearing echoes of past tragedy. I called my then girlfriend and just said, "I need you to stay on the phone with me as I leave the building." After that, I dreaded doing the checks there. The night shift. For several weeks last year I was asked to cover and supervise a warehouse team on an evening shift working until midnight. One of my duties was to check the whole warehouse at the end of the shift for security and health and safety reasons, ensuring everything was good for the morning shift, which started at 7 a.m. I'm not really one for measurements and couldn't tell you the exact size of the warehouse, but think of a large supermarket over 3 floors, and it gives you a pretty good idea of how large the place is. One night I was running late in the warehouse alone at around 0:45 am on the top floor. The top floor was laid out in long, narrow picking aisles, much like a supermarket, with a small packing area where I was standing collecting paperwork. All the aisles were in complete darkness as the lights were powered by movement. The only lit area was the packing bench where I was standing. I was standing square onto one of the aisles and could see down to the very far end of the top floor from where I was. I just finished my paperwork when I heard a click, and the light at the very far end of the aisle came on. I knew it was the one at the very end, as it illuminated the door and wall. I looked quite surprised. I knew there wasn't anyone else in there because they'd all gone 45 minutes before. I'd watched them all leave. Seconds later, there was a click, and the next light came on. Then, a few seconds later, the third light came on. By this point I'm starting to shit myself as, one by one, the aisle begins to light up section by section as if something or someone were walking directly towards me. The hairs on the back of my neck stuck up, and I was frozen as the whole aisle clicked and lit up till it eventually reached the end of the aisle, just feet from where I was standing. It's safe to say I never stayed that late again in the warehouse on my own, and it did freak me out. I told a few of my colleagues, but none of them believed me. I'm a graveyard shift caregiver at a memory care facility. This just happened last night and shook both me and a coworker. We were sitting with a resident in the hallway when we heard a blood-curdling scream. We immediately check every room to see if someone had fallen. Everyone was asleep. What makes it more chilling is the scream we heard was from a resident who passed earlier the previous week. She was terrified and anxious, and morphine didn't seem to help her. I remember one moment of clarity when I checked on her before she passed. She said, "You're my honey," and she was so scared. Watching people with dementia die is heart-wrenching. The amount of mental stress they endure is terrifying because they see things we don't. I feel she is trapped there because she was so hurt. After hours work encounter. This is a fairly recent incident that has me unnerved at work. I'm a parts assistant manager at a dealership. I work to close every day, and I'm the only one who works the counter for the last hour or so. Strange things happen all the time, mostly noises at the back of parts, nothing too crazy. I figure it's just my imagination half the time. Sometimes parts will fall off the shelves, and it will spook me a little, and I'll brush it off. Well, just last week I was alone getting caught up on some paperwork because we are short-staffed at the moment, so it was just myself left after 6 p.m. All the salesmen left, and I know there is nobody left in the building. The lights are off except in parts, obviously. So it's about 7:30 or 8 o'clock when I hear a large bang from the floor on top of me. There are parts stored at the second level in parts, most of which we don't sell many of, so they're stored at the far back. The lights have never worked at the far back no matter how many times we've had electricians fix them. Anyways, I get up from behind my desk to go look. Now it's not completely dark up there, but it's still spooky. As I head up the stairs, I hear this large bang again. I did pause for a second but rushed up the last steps and headed to the back. I didn't see anything, but it got cold, and I had a chill running up my back. There was nothing out of place on the floor or nothing that had been moved or shifted from the shelves, it was all normal. So I start heading back down to my desk, and all the lights go out in parts, and it's pitch black. I know there is no one here, and the switches are downstairs near my desk. My heart stops, and I pull out my cell phone and turn the flashlight on. I find my way to the stairs and start heading down. As I'm getting to the last step, I can hear footsteps coming from upstairs and behind me. I was not about to look, so I ran back to where the light switch was, and I could hear the steps running as I did. I flip the switch, turn around, and see nothing. I was not staying there any longer. I packed up my stuff, turned my computer off, and set the alarm, and I was out of there, the whole time trying to explain the experience away, but I couldn't think of anything. I don't think I'll be staying late at work if I don't have to for a while. Let me know what you think or if you've had a similar experience. I was doing DoorDash deliveries at like 2 a.m. last year. Decided to call it quits for the night and start driving back home. As I start to make my way, an ambulance turns in on the road ahead of me. I get close enough to be able to see in the back before they take off a bit above the speed limit. I saw an elderly man lying back on the stretcher along with a paramedic on the side seat. Pretty normal for what it is. I eventually catch up to them down the road as the ambulance is caught at a red light. This time, the elderly man is sitting up and has shadows for eyes staring at me, along with a huge black mass/shadow behind him. The black mass was completely unaffected by the bright white interior lights. The ambulance speeds off when the light turns green, and I never see it again. I still feel chills recalling the elderly man's stare. I'll never get over this, night shift right now. I worked at a small, old hospital for a couple of years. The hospital had 4 floors, but only 2 of them were in use, along with a small emergency room. I was a med-surg RN working 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. Med-surg meant we had patients who had just had, or needed to have, surgery, as well as patients who were just sick. Most of the patients were elderly and sick with things like pneumonia, anemia, acute kidney failure, etc. When older folks get sick, they tend to get confused and do or say things they normally wouldn't. However, what happened was extremely inappropriate and embarrassing, and I was the only one who witnessed it. We joked that the hospital felt creepy, especially in the right wing of our unit at night, due to its age. Guess who got assigned the right wing that night? Alright, so I got bedtime meds ready for the old folks down there and started walking down the hall with my med card and charts for each patient. I received a report from the previous day's RN stating that room 214 was occupied by a 55-year-old woman named Kathy, who was alert and oriented and admitted for pneumonia. I give the patients down there their meds one by one, and yeah, I'm tired and mildly annoyed that it takes room 216 over 10 minutes to swallow a plethora of pills one by one and then proceed to pull out his 4 that was delivering his antibiotics. I digress. So needless to say, it took me a little longer to get to room 214. She didn't seem upset, just tired. I did my assessment, and she was in fact oriented to day, time, name, and location. I say goodnight after hanging another bag of fluids. I'm hanging out in the hall with my computer, documenting my assessments, and I hear something that shakes me. It sounded like whispering, but I heard more than one person doing it. I cocked my head up and heard better. I mean, it is night shift, and I'm tired, so I'm making sure I actually heard this. I followed the noise to the outside of Kathy's room. And there appears to be a full-blown whispery conversation going on with multiple people. I couldn't make out what the different voices were saying, but it sounded like chanting of some sort. I had to make sure I was legitimately hearing these whispers that seemed like they were coming from different people and try to make sense of it. I walked slowly past her door, which was slightly cracked open. As I hoped to hear the whispers more clearly, the chanting sounds only grew louder and remained unintelligible. Kathy, who had been tucked in bed and dozing off when I saw her less than 7 minutes ago, was now sitting straight up on the side of her bed, looking away from me at the wall. Doesn't sound that scary, right? Well, Kathy was unable to lift herself out of bed without assistance during my assessment. Kathy was having labored breathing when I assessed her. Now Kathy has pulled her nasal cannula out of her nose, that plastic thing that goes around your face and has 2 spouts that go up your nose to give you extra oxygen. She sat up in bed in less than 7 minutes without struggling, and then she stood up, still looking away. She turned and walked to the bathroom, still without seeing me. Because she was labeled a fall risk, she shouldn't be out of bed alone. I saw her profile, and her lips were not moving. But the whispers grew louder. I panicked. But I kept my cool. I briskly walked to the nurse's station and asked if a nursing assistant could please help Kathy with the restroom. I normally would do it myself, but I was rather busy, and Kathy was doing quite well on her own. I was sweating, freaking out, and getting further behind on my charting. The nursing aide helped Kathy and didn't report anything unusual when I asked how she was doing. I promise, I swear I heard those voices. They were loud. They were unsettling, to say the least. I requested the left wing as often as possible after that and eventually went on to work at a larger hospital. I worked in a library that was founded in the late 1800s. I worked in IT in the basement in an office that you could only reach if you had a keycard. You had to go through 2 keycard locked doors to even get to my desk. I'd work late once a week until about 6, and in the winter it would get dark so early. I hated being in the office down there alone, even though I was perfectly safe because nobody could reach me. One evening I was at my desk, and I heard whistling in the hallway. I could hear large, heavy footsteps, like someone was wearing heavy work boots. My stomach lurched because the only way out of the basement was through the hallway. I heard the footsteps and whistling in. I never heard anyone come through the 2 access doors, so I couldn't rationalize it. I called the main desk and told them what I heard, and they invited me to come up to spend the rest of my shift in their company. There was nowhere to hide in that hallway. I made a quick exit that night. I had another job years later working in a factory. It wasn't old or anything historical. Without specifying too much, it was a food production plant. Given the nature of the factory, you had to wear protective eyewear and a hairnet, and you were encouraged to wear gloves. I really hated the place. The work was so miserable and mind-numbing. I often fantasized about ending my life on the clock. Right when I was in the middle of having these thoughts, an old man came up to me abruptly and asked me how I liked working there. I noticed he wasn't wearing any of the required PPE, so I figured he was management or an owner. I lied and said I liked it. I had a whole conversation with this guy for a few minutes. I turned my head to look at a coworker and looked back, and he was gone. When I asked my manager who the old guy was, she told me to shut up and stop freaking her out. She asked me, "Who told you to mess with me?" Apparently this guy had worked at the plant. He worked there until he died. He was eligible to retire for years but never did. It makes me sad to think even after dying he's still hanging around that factory. Something intriguing happened at work. I, 23 female, work at an assisted living facility, so mostly seniors with dementia. We had a man, let's call him Marv, that lived on the 2nd floor in a couple's suite with his wife. The man passed away, and his wife was moved to a singles room just across from the couple's suite. A few weeks later we had another man, let's call him Lloyd, move into the couple's suite. He has fairly severe dementia but is rich, so his family opted for the bigger couple suite. Lloyd began to report that a young man seated in the corner of the room during the night was watching him. Due to his confusion, most of us dismissed it and continued with our activities. After about 3 weeks of Lloyd complaining about the man, one of the nurses asked him to describe the figure he sees at night. He described Marv, but he portrayed him as much younger than he actually is. Since we are a smaller facility and get pretty close to our residents, we keep the obituaries and pamphlets from their funerals as a memory. This nurse went and got Marv's pamphlet, and it had a young photo of him. She showed Lloyd, and he, with a large smile, said, "That's him. That's the man who sits in my room." We are now all pretty sure Marv stays in the room and waits for his wife, as that was their final home together. It gave us all chills, but it was heartwarming that he is waiting for her and how he watches Lloyd at night. We have a lot of weird stuff happen around the home, especially at night. It's common to hear stories from residents about seeing someone in their rooms or walking the halls. Staff have also had some strange encounters, including seeing someone who has passed away or experiencing unusual occurrences and feeling their presence while in the room. Working in a place that served as the final home for many individuals is interesting, and we have the opportunity to share their last years with them. I definitely think spouses wait for each other now. I work as a caregiver, and I saw something creepy. So I was at my client's home during an overnight. I work 6:30 to 8:30 a.m. At night, I'm there by myself, and he sleeps for 12 hours. I am there to make sure he doesn't wake up and fall and he's alone or he walks out of the house. He has dementia. So he's sleeping in his bed, and I'm looking at the baby monitor. It's 11:11 p.m., and suddenly, the blankets of his bed lift into the air like someone is holding them. Obviously no one is there in the room. It's held there for, 3 seconds and goes back down. I'm seriously creeped out. I'm not sure if a draft could do this, but no windows are open and his doorway is closed. So I'm not sure what happened or if I just saw a poltergeist. Just more detail, but I'm here by myself, and this house is a mansion. It's completely quiet at night, and sometimes it's creepy. I try not to think about scary stuff because I'm there to do a job, but yeah, that was weird. A strange, terrifying experience. My workplace is haunted. So I work in a restaurant in Wyoming that was where the town's original train station was located back in 1894. The original building was moved across the street, and they replaced the train station with a bigger building in 1912, which is the building that I work in now. I've been getting weird feelings since I started working there. I know the building has a lot of history, and I can feel the presence of different entities there for sure. I was scared out of there a few weeks back just from the heavy, overwhelming presence that seems to get worse when it's late and you're alone. But tonight, I was locking up the building. I went to lock the event storage space but realized one of the cooks had left his bike in there, so I went to grab him to pull it out so I could lock it. He went in, grabbed his bike, and walked out, leaving me alone in this room. I shut the door behind him and locked it. I walked through the room to the other side to turn the light off before walking through a swinging door that leads to the event dining area. As I turn the light off, I hear a raspy, disgruntled voice loudly and clearly say "Mommy, Daddy" from the other side of the room. I'm not kidding you, I ran so fast out of that room through the building I felt like I teleported. I found the cook, and he walked through to see if anyone was in there, and there was no one. It was just us two and one more server that was on the other side of the building rolling silverware. It was a very evil sounding voice, definitely not a child. I should not have run like a terrified child because now I believe it's going to just try to scare me more next time. It felt like it was intentionally waiting for me to be alone and for me to turn the lights off. Y'all, I'm ready to quit because I'm sensitive to entities and can feel them. This just feels evil. Haunted workplace? So, long story short, I'm a tattoo apprentice and need to work 3 cleaning jobs to support myself whilst I train. One of these jobs is based at a grade 2 listed Georgian house, which is used as an office space. I clean there twice a week and normally do late hours, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. It's a good job, as I get left on my own to clean and they're relatively tidy there, but the company has not been able to keep anyone on. I was told this by my friend who has been working for the company much longer than I have. She mentioned that people ducked out usually after a couple of weeks. They just assumed that it was a very hard job that no one wanted. My first shift was fine. The house has 3 floors, with the top one, the old servants' quarters, being used for storage and toilet stalls. I did notice that this top floor seemed a little creepy, but it's an old house, and I'm cleaning into the night, so I just assumed I was imagining it. A couple of times I thought I heard voices but again brushed it off as people on the street outside being loud. The second shift was different. I noticed straight away after letting myself in that the atmosphere felt weird. I know that's not very scientific or logical to say that, but it definitely felt heavy, and I felt that someone was watching me go from room to room. I work with a top-down approach, so I started on the 3rd floor with the old servants' quarters / bathroom stalls. The doors to the stalls are super heavy and will not stay open, which is a pain when I'm cleaning. Once opened, they swing shut and stay that way. So once I'd finished, I was 100% sure that all stalls were shut and tidy. The bathroom felt distinctly colder on that day, despite the 30 degrees Celsius temperature outside. I ignored it and carried on. I started to hoover the stairs, and before long, I heard a creak and a slam. I looked up and saw the middle bathroom stall door swing open on its own, then shut. This was definitely weird, but maybe it was some fluke and I had propped it open somehow. Nothing was in the way of the door, so a little freaked out, I checked everything over and carried on. Once everything was shut up, I headed downstairs to clean the lower floors. Fast forward to when I'm packing up, ready to go on the ground floor, and suddenly hear the loud slam of doors from upstairs. Now I know that I've locked and shut everything up, so I'm freaked out. I look up the stairwell and can see the bathroom stall lights are on and can hear the slamming from up there. I'm shaking by now, and fear has set in. I shout hello, but there's no response. The doors suddenly stop slamming, but as I peer up, I can distinctly hear heavy footsteps thumping down the stairs towards me. I'm not proud of this, but I absolutely legged it out of there and left, leaving the lights on. I rang my boss, and he came in with me whilst I turned everything off and locked up. The weird thing was that he didn't seem surprised. I've been in 4 times since then. Twice, the shifts have been fine, and twice I've heard footsteps, voices, and small knocks and bangs from upstairs again. Haunted workplace. I used to work as a cleaner when I was 16 in between colleges. This is the UK, so I had already left school. The place I worked was a popular clothing store near my house and built over ancient farmland. Also, there are rumors of Druid burial grounds nearby, but that's another story, lol. I've always been sensitive to the paranormal from a very young age, but this was by far the most haunted place I've ever worked and my first apparition sighting. We were a team of 4 to 5, and all of us were assigned to different parts of the store. One of the sections was the women's fitting rooms. We would vacuum the rugs and cubicles, polish the mirrors, and all of that. You would hear high heels on the tiles the whole time you were down there and the sounds of rustling paper, coat hangers rattling, etc. There was a general feeling of discomfort and unease, as if someone was following and watching you. This is hours before the store opened, so no customers. Sometimes a manager would be there, but they stayed upstairs in the office. The next part was the men's clothing area, which was on the 2nd floor. When you cleaned there, you were alone but for the occasional manager walking through. One time I was on the floor cleaning the railings by the cash registers, and a huge black shadow swept over me. I was surprised because I hadn't heard anybody approach, and as I looked around, I was definitely alone. My cleaning routine was to sweep the floor and collect the dirt into little piles around the pillars, then sweep it all up in one go at the end. The dirt piles moved constantly. I would go back to do the final big sweep, and some of the piles had disappeared. After I clocked out, the piles would be there again. I had a sense that the spirit was a young male farmhand and mischievous. I said as much to my coworker, and she told me she refuses to clean that area after polishing the mirrors one day and seeing the disembodied head of a young man peering over her shoulder. Again, the sound of coat hangers rattling and shuffling noises, but I never felt threatened by it. I used to laugh it off or tell the spirit to stop, and he would usually comply. Now after the store was clean, we would clean the staff quarters. Toilets, canteens, and meeting rooms. The toilets were a non-paranormal horror in themselves, lol. Note, I worked here with my mother. We were assigned to clean the female toilets, and usually if somebody was using them, we would leave and give them privacy until they finished. We went in, the middle stall was closed, and we heard rustling paper and heavy breathing, so we left and waited. And waited. And waited. The cleaning cupboard was right next to the toilets and didn't even have a door. We would have seen and heard somebody leaving. To leave and enter the toilets, you would have to walk straight past the open doorway and then walk down the corridor that directly faced it. An L-shaped corridor with the toilets on the far end and the cleaning cupboard on the corner, except when we went in after waiting for 10 to 15 minutes, the middle stall door was wide open and empty. Now on to the apparition. The children's clothing area was generally less creepy. Coat hangers were moving again, sometimes things would fall off the shelves and rails, but we shrugged it off. The elevator was directly opposite the children's clothing, and we usually loaded our cleaning equipment in it because it was too heavy to carry up the stairs. I remember rinsing my mop out, and I glanced up. There was a little boy around 6-7 years old standing directly in front of me. He wore a flat cap, a pale shirt with suspenders, dark shorts, and socks up to his knees. At first I thought it was a mannequin, and when I blinked, he was gone. Thought I was just tired and shook my head. I talked to my mother about it later, as she is Wiccan and super into the supernatural, and she described the boy to her. She had seen the same child a few weeks earlier, but only from behind, as if he were walking around a corner. She told me she had the feeling he had died of a lung-related sickness. Perhaps tuberculosis or pneumonia. So there you have it. Some of it can be explained by tiredness, I know, but I just thought I'd share this experience here. Is my workplace haunted? Am I going crazy? Something else? In the past year or so, I've seen 3 figures while working in a group home. With each figure I've seen, my brain instantly assumed that it was a specific person before quickly realizing it couldn't have been that person, or that anyone was even there. I'm not the first person to have seen something at this group home, Coworkers past and present have mentioned witnessing unexplained phenomena, with most of the reports being of shadow figures. As in, they straight up saw a shadow that moved like a person. However, when I saw the figures, they weren't shadows. Basically, I'd seen something, and my brain would tell me, so-and-so just went into the kitchen, or so-and-so just walked past me, only for me to realize that nobody had been there. People have also reported hearing strange voices over monitors during third shift, TVs or lights turning on by themselves, or hearing doors slam with no one around to do so. Multiple people witnessed a curtain unfurl itself. One night, 2 staff were working third shift together. They were both sitting at the table together when suddenly one of their phones started ringing with a messenger call. She goes to answer it and sees that it was from the other staff that she was sitting there talking to, but the other staff had their phone plugged in and charging in the kitchen. The other staff goes to check on their phone, and lo and behold, it was calling the girl on Facebook. So there have been many creepy instances at work, and I find most of my coworkers credible, although I'm sure some have embellished their paranormal stories. My first experience happened probably around a year ago. I was sitting at the computer desk in the living room, facing the kitchen doorway. I was the only staff member in the living room at the time, so I had to watch over the residents while the other 2 were assisting some of them to bed. Suddenly, I saw someone walk into the kitchen, and though I didn't get a close look at them, my mind instantly assumed it had been one of the residents. I'll call him Adam. We only have 3 residents in the home that walk unassisted, and the gait and stature matched Adam. After about 5 seconds, I remembered that Adam wasn't even home. Confused and wondering if maybe Adam had come home early from the movies with another staff member, I went into the kitchen only to see nobody in there. The kitchen isn't very big, with nowhere for someone to hide behind, and there is no other exit, so if I had truly seen someone walk in there, they would have still been in there. I thought it was super weird but just brushed it off, thinking my mind was just playing tricks on me. Adam came home later on and got a kick out of it when I told him I had seen him walking into the kitchen while he was out watching a horror movie. The next experience I had happened earlier this year. Once again I was watching over the living room as other staff were assisting other residents to bed. One of the staff came out into the living room, and we talked a little bit before they took some soiled clothes to the laundry room. They came out shortly after and went into the kitchen, so I was going to go back down the hall to finish what I had to do. That's when I thought the other staff, a bigger girl I'll call Beth, way taller than me and heavy set, had walked past me carrying stuff to take to the laundry room. Again, I didn't get a good look at Beth, but I could have sworn she had just walked past me. But when I walked down the hall, I almost ran into Beth as she was coming out of another resident's room. Within mere seconds. I told her what had just happened, and we were both confused, as she had obviously been assisting one of the residents to get ready for bed. I went right back down to the laundry room, and there was nobody in there. That kind of shook me up because I couldn't really find a reasonable explanation for that, and it reminded me of when I had seen Adam. This last experience literally happened the other day. I was assisting one of the residents with his BiPAP machine and getting him ready for bed when I turned and saw one of the staff, I'll call her Kathy, walking past his open doorway. I remember seeing her pink sweatshirt, one she wears frequently, and assuming she was going down to check on one of the residents at that end of the hallway. When I was done, about 10 seconds later, I went to go check to see if Kathy needed help. But she wasn't anywhere to be found. I called her name, and she didn't respond. When I went back out to the living room, Kathy was sitting at the table, so I asked her if she had gone down the hall. She said no, and I realized that she was wearing a different sweatshirt than the one I had just seen, still pink, but it was a darker pink. She said I probably saw Sam walk by, but I told her that I was in Sam's room helping him to bed at the time and that I had seen her walk by with her lighter pink sweatshirt. The other staff vouched for the fact that Kathy had been in the living room that whole time. This instance was the most unsettling for me because this time I had noticed a specific detail, Kathy's sweatshirt. I've only ever experienced this at work and have never really had any other unexplained experiences. A handful of past residents have passed in the home, although none of the figures I'd seen resembled any of the residents I had known or any that I had been made aware of. I've tried to rationalize this, but I haven't been able to come up with any explanations that satisfy me. I get plenty of sleep most nights, so it's not like I'd be having sleep deprivation-induced hallucinations. I highly doubt it's carbon monoxide related. I don't believe there are any potential sources of carbon monoxide in the home, and detectors would be mandatory anyway, I'm certain. I was a bit stressed on the night that I saw Kathy, but I don't recall being particularly stressed during either of the other incidents. Toxic mold? I've read that toxic mold can potentially cause hallucinations but haven't really noted any other signs or symptoms of that in myself or any of the residents/staff working in the home. I've always been intrigued by unexplained/paranormal stories, but I've also been a skeptic too. I've been searching for a logical explanation for these sightings, but I've been unable to reach a conclusion. I've only been experiencing anything like this at work, and the fact that other people have talked about strange things suggests there is something paranormal going on. Alternatively, I might be experiencing hallucinations, which really freaks me out. Does anyone have any advice or similar experiences? This happened to me about 3 years ago when I was working in an advertising agency. I was working very late that night. It was probably close to 3 a.m., and as far as I could tell, I was probably the only one there at the time. If you were to walk into my department, you would see what is essentially a long and wide hallway with tall, wooden cupboard desks on the left and right. The left would have 4 desks where the directors/seniors would sit, while the right would have about 8 desks arranged to create a cubicle space for the juniors. This arrangement is repeated 4 times along the hallway, essentially creating 4 segments of space that belong to a different team/brand. This also naturally creates an aisle walkway right through the middle. I have an aisle seat in the 3rd section. So when I sit down, I can't see directly in front of me because it's the tall cupboard desk thing. But leaning to the side, I can basically see the whole length of the hallway with a clear view of the desks in the 1st section. The 1st section belonged to a milk brand, so the top of their cupboards was stacked with many samples of milk cartons of different designs. So that night, as I was the only one there, only my section was lit with the ceiling fan on. I was typing emails and was already feeling uneasy with how dark the whole office is and the fact that it's ducking 3 a.m., aka the witching hour. And it didn't help that my brain was reminding me of all the office horror stories my colleagues have shared over the years, like how this building was built over a damn graveyard. And suddenly, I heard a clattering of items, and I immediately peeked my head out only to see down the hallway that nearly all the milk cartons at the 1st section had fallen. Looking up, the ceiling fan was off. Mind you, there's no way the airflow from my section caused that because the space between our sections is very big. So, if that wasn't a sign telling me to GTFO of the office now, then I don't know what was. I slammed my laptop shut, stuffed it into my bag, and headed straight home. Haunted Hospital, Warren, Pennsylvania. So I was working at this hospital called Warren General in Warren, Pennsylvania, about 90 minutes east of Erie, Pennsylvania. I worked the night shift. I am a travel physician, so this was one of the hospitals I traveled to. One night my floor was slow, so I went down to the CCU to help the critical care doctor who was swamped. Well, that night my patient rang her call bell at 3 o'clock in the morning, and she asked me, "What does she want?" I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "The nurse that keeps coming in here and standing there in that corner," and she points to the corner behind the door. So I was like, "Who, Ashley?" The nurse I was working with, and I pointed to her. She was sitting at the nurse's station on the computer, and she said, "No, the other one." Well, there was no other one, it was just us two. The patient was a woman in her 50s and didn't have a history of mental illness and was not taking any meds that would make her hallucinate, so I laughed, and I was like, "It's just us," and she just stares at me, so I say, "Okay, if she does it again, just yell for me and I'll come right in." Her room was 8 feet in front of the nurse station. So about a half hour goes by, and she yells, "See, there you go again." I got up and started walking. I heard the bathroom door shut. It had been cracked open just a little bit to give her dark room a little light. I walk in, and I say, "See, you're dreaming, there is no one else here." She says, "No, she went in the bathroom." So I open the door, lights still on, no one in there. Looking confused, I say, what does she look like?" Because I thought someone was messing around. It's too dark to tell. I can tell it's a woman, but she's so dark I can't really make her face out. So when she says that, I get a little weirded out, but the night ends and I forget about it. 3 months go by, and I get pulled back down to the same unit. I have the same room as before. This time a man in his early 60s is the patient, a nice guy, alert and oriented, and very polite. Night is going good, it's about 3 a.m., and his call light goes off, which means he needs something, so I walk in, and he says to me, "You are my nurse, right?" And I shake my head yes, and he says, "Well, why does that lady keep coming in here and standing in the corner? What is she doing?" What? I almost shit myself instantly. This was 3 months later, same room, same thing. I said to him, "Honestly, I think it's a ghost, sir," and he laughs, and I say, "You're not the first one to say that." I started telling everyone about it, and then I found out that the entire 2nd floor has a nurse that's seen every once in a while. I believe that in the 1990s, a nurse who worked on the 2nd floor ended herself in the bathroom due to stress. I was employed as a contracted employee at the Winchester Mystery House a few years ago. I had the swing shift and some overnights when the grave called out. This is my personal opinion. Yes, there are entities that reside there. I had a few strange instances when I knew I was the only person on the estate. Sometimes I'd be sitting in the front gardens, and I'd see the gift shop automatic doors open and close by themselves. I was the only person on the property and nowhere near them to trigger them. Maybe a small animal, but who knows? It was just kind of creepy because it was always late at night. Some nights it sounded like there were people having conversations faintly from inside the house. I had to go upstairs and put my equipment away. It was like offices for the bosses, but there was a door in the back that opened up into the house. I would open it and peer in because your first thought is like, who the duck is that at 11:45 p.m.? You know? It did kind of freak me out. I closed that shit and went back downstairs. Also, there was a framed picture of Sarah on the wall. It was a picture of her wax figure face, and it was just creepy. It had cold, dead eyes that felt like they were watching you while you were upstairs. A few other stories too. Co-workers and actual Winchester Mystery House employees told me stories because I'd always ask them. Another observation from my time there was how many car accidents happen right in front of or within view of the estate. It was almost abnormal, like every 2 weeks there was some kind of accident on Winchester Boulevard, from small fender benders to people hitting poles, etc., but always in sight of the house. Similarly, the crazies always seemed to be attracted to the house. Many a night I'd have people who were mentally lacking or having some kind of episode in the parking lot or at the front gate that faces Winchester Boulevard, like mentally ill people screaming at the house. That shit happened more than once, and it always tripped me out. I know it could just be a coincidence, but these are my lived experiences at Winchester Mystery House. I think the estate has always been a vortex for spirits and entities to come and go. There's a lot of energy concentrated there in that one spot. Obviously yes, they are overpriced with their tickets, and they harp on the spooky factor to get people in the door. 90% of people won't experience anything, and I get that. There is a whole money side to it. The GM, Walter, was kind of an asshole, as were some of the upper management, like snobby. Same for some of the tour guides, rich little entitled white girls who never said hi when you greeted them. That shit reminded me that it's just a business now and they are exploiting it for all it's worth, but such is life. Regardless, I personally think there are definitely things that lurk there when everyone goes home, in the wee hours of the night when the veil is thin. I saw a shadow person at my haunted workplace. Hello everyone. I thought my experience would be enjoyed here. I work at an escape room. It's a super fun job, and I absolutely love it. The location used to be a house, and we have a lovely break room with a balcony. Our lovely lunchtime view? A cemetery. We could not be closer to a cemetery if we tried. We joke a lot about the building being haunted and have named the ghosts after different characters in the rooms. Some days, it's more of a joke than others. I have plenty of paranormal stories I can tell, so if y'all want them, I'll share more here, but this is by far my favorite. One of our games has a tunnel you have to crawl through that leads to an open panel of the wall of the next room. I have a bird's eye view facing this open paneled wall from the security camera. The tunnel is tall enough to stand in the back of it and, with the entrance, exit, and actual tunnel, forms a U shape. This will be important later. On to the story. I was running a game for a group of 7. I remember there were 7 players because our rooms have a capacity of 8, and since it was the peak of summer, we blocked off the final spot as a courtesy to prevent this group of 7 from playing with a single stranger if the 8th spot was booked. Anyway, the team is doing great, and they exit the tunnel into the final room. They're figuring out the main puzzle of said room when I look at the open panel that I can see from the aforementioned camera. What do I see? The distinct shadow of someone standing in the tunnel. I find that odd since I thought everyone had left the tunnel and there was no real reason to go back. I count the people visible in the final room, and how many do I count? 7. I switch to the tunnel camera to see if someone's inside, and of course, it's empty. I return to the camera so I can see everyone, and the shadow has vanished. I know this room like the back of my hand, and at the time, I had run it over 100 times. I know the layout and everything inside, and nothing could have cast that shadow. There is literally nothing in the tunnel. I very well could have just miscounted the people, but I just think it's a fun story to think about. Thanks for listening. I saw my first entity at work. To begin this, I work in a hospital in the psych unit, and we are on the opposite side of the actual hospital and in our own section. I work in the adult unit, and we have 2 sides, a side for more mild patients and another side separated by double locked doors that has 2 windows for more intensive patients. On this particular night we shut the mild side down because we discharged our last patient and only had the intensive side open. I kept going back and forth to the milder side because most of our paperwork and things we need are on that side. I was starting to feel anxious because the large, empty area felt eerie, and I often get strange vibes in the unit at night. As I was making my way back towards the double doors, I looked in the window and saw a reflection of someone behind me. At first I thought it was a patient on the other side of the doors, but it was an unfamiliar face. It looked like an elderly person, and as I looked harder, they were smiling ear to ear, which freaked me the hell out. I stared for a little while, thinking my mind was just playing tricks on me due to the long, stressful night, but sure enough, it was definitely someone smiling at me. I freaked out, unlocked the doors to the other side, and refused to go out there again alone. I know what I saw, but I seriously cannot believe it. I do believe in spirits and energies, but I have never seen something like this in my life. And there is no possible way it was a patient on the other side of the doors because when I went back there, everyone was in their rooms. There have been stories I've heard from coworkers about certain rooms being haunted, but I brushed them off because if I truly believed them, I would never go back to work lol. I don't know, I just needed to share this with someone because the image of whoever or whatever was behind me is burned into my brain. I'm a nurse in a haunted hospital. We don't tell the patients these stories. I work as a nurse in a post-surgical unit in the biggest hospital in my city. Patients come from hundreds of miles away to get their operations here. The surgeons are known to be the best. But what we don't tell the patients, what we're not supposed to tell them, is that there are ghosts here. Just like any other hospital, people pass away, and their spirits sometimes linger, or maybe it is just a fragment of them that remains behind, something that science can't explain yet. There have been more than a few events that have raised the hair on the back of my neck, and some have sent me into hysterical screaming fits. But those types of reactions are frowned upon in the hospital. So I try to stay calm. There was that time a few months ago when a patient told me she felt like there were 3 other people in the ward room with her, in each of the other 3 beds around her. They were talking back and forth and whispering, she said. But the weird thing was, she was alone in the 4-bed room. I pulled back the curtains and showed her myself. All of the other beds were empty, and there were no visitors or staff in the room with her. As if that weren't disturbing enough, a few weeks later a different patient said the exact same thing when she had been left alone in the same room. She described it exactly the same way, saying they were whispering back and forth and it was keeping her awake. I felt a chill up my spine when she told me that, but I reassured her that the room was empty and she was simply imagining things. People have enough to worry about when they're recovering from surgery. We don't need them fretting about specters and ghosts when they should be worried about physio and discharge appointments, lifting restrictions, and medication adjustments. So we keep these stories to ourselves. Some nurses said they couldn't sleep in a certain storage room during breaks on the night shift since they'd had too many bad experiences there. When I asked them about it, they said they'd had bad dreams and felt like someone was in the room with them, standing over them while they slept. I didn't believe in those things myself, so I slept in there on the night shift and found out firsthand why nobody else wanted to use it as a nap room during breaks. I had the most realistic waking dream I'd ever had, where I'd awoken in the storage room and felt like someone was in there with me, watching me from the corner of the room, their dark outline visible in the dim room. When I went to turn on the lights, they didn't work, and the door wouldn't open, and for some reason in my dream, which seemed like reality, I chose to lie back down and go to sleep again, while the thing crept closer and closer, vanishing only to reappear just above me. It felt like my eyes were open the whole time, and I was forced to watch, paralyzed, as it hovered over top of me. For what felt like hours, it was watching me while I slept, as I struggled and was unable to move. I finally came to my senses and finished my break early, going back to work and trying to forget about the horrible experience. But I refused to sleep in that storage room again. There was another event that haunts me to this day, especially since I'm heading in for a night shift right now, in just a few minutes. Another nurse told me a story on the night shift last week, and I've been thinking about it a lot since then, and it's been occupying my mind more and more, especially when I'm alone in the break room at night. We have a staff room where there are 2 small couches and a TV. Some nurses go in there to sleep during breaks on the night shift, and we try our best not to wake them up. She was sleeping on the couch there one night, and a bright light woke her up. There's an adjoining room with a bathroom and lockers, so she figured one of the nurses had gone in there and left the light on. I looked over at the door, she told me. You know how it has that little glass window and you can see through to the other side? Yeah, I said. I see it every day. So, there's this woman on the other side of the door. And she's looking at me through the glass. I got shivers up my spine when she said this. Maybe because it was the night shift, maybe because that was where I was going on my break in an hour to sleep, or at least try to. And so I see her there, but she's not really looking at me. She's just kind of staring straight ahead. And the first thing I notice about her is her hair. It was in this very old-fashioned sort of style, not like anything you'd see today. It was like it was from the 70s or earlier, maybe. And she was wearing these funky blue pinstripe scrubs. And a nurse's cap. You know, nobody wears a cap anymore these days. And those scrubs. They looked like the ones, you know, in the lobby. How do they have those ones on display? From way back when? Yeah, they looked just like that. I was nodding along, able to picture all of it, as if I were there with her. Another nurse walked in and heard us. "What are you guys talking about?" "Ghosts," I replied simply. He scoffed. "You guys believe in that stuff?" The two of us shared a knowing look. He hadn't been working on the floor long enough to have seen them himself. And some people just aren't attuned to these things. The nurse went back to her story. "So she's just standing there, staring straight ahead. And I thought it was the fourth nurse at first. Because sometimes they'd come in during the night shift and use the bathroom or whatever. So I yelled at her, 'Hey! Turn that light off, will you? I'm trying to sleep in here.' But she just kept staring straight ahead. So I just put the pillow over my head and tried to sleep some more. Then when I woke up later on, that light was still on. So I asked around. Nobody came in there during the night, and that room is locked, so it wasn't a patient. And I saw the fourth nurse later on, and they were not dressed like that. So, yeah. I'm pretty sure I know who it was, though." According to her, the woman was the ghost of a nurse who had died driving home after a long night shift and had fallen asleep at the wheel. Based on the description she'd given, an older coworker had recognized her. She'd said that was exactly what an old nurse who used to work there looked like. And from that point on, the nurse who told me this story always remembered to stay awake behind the wheel on the drive home. Every time my eyes start to blink and I'm getting tired, man, I think about that old nurse with the curly gray hair standing behind the glass, and I'm wide awake again. Better than a frickin' cup of coffee, I'll tell you. Something occurred to me as she finished the story. That's really weird. My patient in room 14 told me last night that they saw someone peeking their head in the room and looking at them. And sometimes they would stand in the doorway and just stare at them for a while. She said the person had a very old-fashioned haircut and old-fashioned scrubs. She thought it was a ghost or maybe a hallucination. Ghosts and hallucinations are commonplace on the post-surgical floor, and sometimes it can be difficult to tell the two apart. Pain medication-induced postoperative delirium is not unheard of, especially in the elderly. She thought it was the Dilaudid. So none of that tonight. Just sticking with Tylenol. "Good idea," the other nurse said, and I excused myself. I figured I'd check on my patients. Especially the ones in room 14. I was somewhat unsurprised to see a woman in blue pinstripe scrubs with a cap looking in at them from the doorway. Despite my terror, I began to walk on shaky legs down the hall towards her. She turned to look at me and went away from the patient's room, going down the side hall at the end of the unit. I ran to catch up with her, needing to see for myself who she was. When I got to the end of the hall, I looked to the left. She was gone. But it had only been a few seconds. I ran down the short length of hallway to the next corridor. This other one was much, much longer. She could not have disappeared so quickly unless she went into a patient room. But again, she was gone. My heart hammering in my chest, I refused to believe it was a ghost. Such things didn't exist. They just couldn't. Room 9 was the only one she could have gone into in such a hurry. I went in and found all of the patients were wide awake, despite the late hour of the night. It was 3 a.m., and everyone should have been asleep. "It's freezing in here. Can you please get me a warm blanket?" asked the patient by the door. I told her I would, and she nearly screamed in fright. "Oh my goodness," the old woman said, startled. "I didn't see you there, so who were you talking to?" I asked. "The other nurse. The one who just came in." "Where did she go?" I felt a presence behind me and looked to see the shape of something moving, but then it was gone, like a wisp of smoke on a windy day. Not wanting to tell the woman it had been a ghost, I just made up an excuse and told the woman I'd get her a warm blanket. Nothing seemed to help, though. None of the patients in that room slept very well that night. If at all. They kept saying they felt like there was something lying in the bed right next to them. Come to think of it, it's the same room where patients kept imagining other people were in the room with them. Except this time it really was full. I haven't seen the ghost nurse since that night. And I'm hoping I never do again. It's terrifying, to say the least, since I don't really understand why she's here. And you never know exactly when she's going to show up. I'm heading into work for another night shift now. Wish me luck. I worked at a nursing home owned by nuns for 10 years. This home was built in the early 50s. I worked the dishes for something like 8 years on the evening shift, from 4 to 9 p.m. One time I was finishing my shift just cleaning the machine and the room, and I heard my name. I thought it was one of the nuns spying on me. Those nuns kept spying on us and would appear out of nowhere sometimes. It was their trick. So I go to the kitchen and ask if anyone is there. No answer. There was a weird vibe. I could only hear the buzz of the neon lights and the fridges and the ventilation. There was no one in the kitchen or the hallway or the employees' cafeteria. Weird. Later on, an employee told me that the kitchen used to be a mortuary and the place where they exposed the deceased. Another time, this guy working for maintenance told me that he was working in the furnace room and saw a nun pass by. He said, "Good day, sister." The nun just walked out of the room. He was new at work and later on realized that she wasn't even living there, and he never saw her again. He was calm when he said that, and he added, "I have a gift to see these kinds of things. I probably have more but forgot about it." Nursing homes are really scary at night. Especially one with tons of empty rooms like that place. I worked for a call center at a business in town that had many national names on its client list. We mostly worked second shift while the business portion worked first shift. The call center was busiest during the second shift. We tried to catch people watching TV or having dinner. The business occupied 2 buildings, one 3 stories and one 4 stories tall, that had been renovated into one, with a covered atrium in the middle. The buildings had a lot of charm. One elevator had the decorative cage you had to close by hand and buttons for the floors, but on the call center side there was a much smaller elevator. This elevator had a normal door on each floor with a doorknob. Yes, there was a safety mechanism to prevent people from opening it if the elevator wasn't on that floor. Every door for that elevator had one of those hydraulic things attached to the top so it would open and close slowly. The elevator was small, too, like standing in a small closet with a few people, and the control was a rocker arm. Pull the arm one way and the elevator goes up, push it another way and the elevator goes down. It was common for new hires to stop the elevator between floors until they mastered the touch of it. Rumors said that these 2 buildings were a seedy hotel and a brothel back in the day. There were even stories of endings, but I don't think I ever saw anything to confirm this. In all fairness, I never went to the library to investigate. Anyway, there would be occasional reports of apparitions and such, but I never saw anything. One person I was close to swore up and down, and still to this day, that she saw a woman with no face in the big elevator going up. She was wearing a white dress. Stories like this would occasionally be told, especially of the white dress wearing woman. Everybody also always got a creepy feeling in the basement passageway to the break room. Business was so good that we outgrew our space and were planning on moving 2 blocks south to a high-rise building. There was a lot of excitement in the air about this move. I think whatever was hanging out in the building also knew because the intensity and frequency of the experiences grew. Sightings went up, but so did reports of people feeling like they were being watched. Doors would slam with nobody around. We always had a receptionist on the ground floor because this was the early 90s, and of course we did. I worked with her, I'll call her Aretha, for a few years as a phone operator in the call center. She worked second shift like us in the call center. Remember that little elevator with the sway controller and the hydraulic arm at the top of the door to prevent it from being opened or closed too quickly? The ground floor door for that elevator slammed shut. We could all hear it even on the 2nd and 3rd floors. I ran down the steps, and Aretha was beside herself. She was white as a ghost, lol. She said it just slammed by itself. We tried several times to slam that door, but the hydraulic system always prevented it. The business moved as planned, flourished for several years, got bought out, and is now gone. Those buildings are still standing. Another business moved into the spot, so about 13 years after we moved out, I applied for a job there just to get an interview inside. I didn't want the job, and I wasn't qualified, but it was cool being inside one more time. Now the building has luxury lofts and is no longer a place of business. I'd love to have a conversation with one or a few of the tenants. Paranormal activity. The residential home I work at is haunted, but the ghosts aren't aggressive. I am a 22-year-old female working night shifts at a residential home, and I have noticed that the place may be haunted. During the night the elevators will randomly go up and down and often stay open for, 5 minutes. Along with that, one elevator that I use a lot always has this BO smell in it. But what's weirder is it will be really strong, like the person is actively in the elevator with me, and when I go back in, to go down, after helping whoever paged me, the elevator doesn't smell whatsoever, and sure, it would make sense if it was 20 to 30 minutes later, but this is usually within 10 minutes of going up, helping said person, and then going back down. I have to keep the hallway lights off upstairs and downstairs, but it's a lot like in school, where a few lights are left on even after switching them off, and I will say it feels like someone is watching me when I walk down them, and the floors are shit, so any step you take, the whole floor lets your presence be known. They have a small, room-sized chapel upstairs, and once when I went in, just because I hadn't been in before and I was bored and wanted to go in lol, I got instant chills all over and goosebumps. It was so bizarre, and it was the first time I had ever experienced that sensation when entering a room. I enjoy watching horror movies, but I also have a strong fear of the paranormal, which is why I have jumped or freaked out a few times when I heard noises. Occasionally the pager will pop up with a resident who's recently passed away. Or my radio, walkie-talkie, will just randomly go off and push static through. A few times when someone accidentally lays on their button, the button is pressed, we are paged on a pager, the room number pops up, and we go to that room to see what they need. I will walk into a completely dark room and catch a glimpse of a shadow, or something catches my eye and disappears, but I've never been hurt. Never been hurt, never been actively haunted, never been spooked, besides me doing it to myself, and never felt an aura of threat. I treat my residents as if they are family when I clock in and have always been kind to them, so I'd like to think the spirits are friendly because I treat everyone so well. I just think it's funny that I might be surrounded by spirits, but they don't mind my presence, so they are chilling. I need to talk about what's happening at work. I've been a caregiver for a few years now. I've worked in last chance houses and organizations that aid and house the mentally ill. And I've been a care provider that would go to the individual's home to clean or do personal care. Currently, I oversee an entire branch of a home care providing company that stretches out to several small towns and one moderately sized city. In my years of working in this field, I've come to notice things. I consider myself a rational person. I need hard evidence. I'm by the book. But this field of work has shown me that some things can't be explained away. Which is why I am here. Because it bothers me. I need other people to see something I've missed. To make sense of these encounters. I'll start with one. Incident 1. I have a client who has a debilitating disease, one that attacks and eats away at the nerves. Yes, recovery is possible if you're a millionaire, but it'll never be a full recovery. He also suffers from a brain disorder that corrupts his memory, personality, and behavior. Despite all this, he's a wonderful client. I rarely come down from my big boss's tower, but when I do, it's to cover a shift with him. My first few visits with him were as expected. He could only talk about 4 topics that he could remember. And he'd repeat them throughout the shift. But he's so energetic and positive that it's a joy to be around him. He'd sometimes turn and look at me to say, "Damn, baby, you look good. I ain't lying." Then forget who I was entirely. His wife and I would share a laugh each time he did, as we think he thinks I'm her from when they first met. This was my usual encounter with him. On one visit his wife mentioned that she's fighting to get him on a revolutionary treatment. Not available in the States. I wished her luck. She had a sad, hopeful smile as she drew in a drag of her cigarette, nodding her head as a thanks. At this point, he looked like he wasn't going to get better. He was declining, and there wasn't much hope left. A month or so passes when I have to cover for his usual caregiver. I knock, open the door, and go inside, and I hear the two of them talking. Having a real conversation. I approached them, and the client looked at me and was present. He was actually looking at me and knew who I was. He then went on to tell me about his week. What he did. Who he saw. He talked about this coherently. Still some stumbling, but there was flow to his sentences. They made sense. No repeats. I was blown away. He's still in his wheelchair, but the change of cognition was incredible. I looked to his wife, mind you I'm smiling like a moron, and I asked her, "Did you get that treatment going overseas? He's a whole new man." His wife ashed her cigarette, looked at me, and smiled like I've never seen her smile. The kind of smile a kid gets when winning a goldfish at the fair. "Nope," she said with a pop of the lips. "He got hands laid on him." What? Now, I'm not religious. I was once a Satanist, raised Roman Catholic, unfortunately, bad memories there, and determined that it's all just a coping method to comfort us when faced with our own or others' mortality. Yet, what she told me next has now become a haunting thought in the back of my head. We were at church, and the preacher man came on up to us and put his hands on the client's name and started blessing him. Everyone was singing and praying, and then the preacher finished and went back up to the altar. And I swear to you, my man, my name looked at me and said, "I want to go to that altar." And he got up from his chair and walked 25 steps there and back. Everyone was crying. He hadn't walked since 2016. And at that point I tuned her out. Like I've stated, I don't believe in that stuff, and I felt like she was in need of something good in her life, so she spun this story to me. I smiled. I nodded my head. And I got to my tasks with her husband. 3 years of no walking, then all of a sudden walking? Because he was touched by a holy man and in the way the church doesn't try to cover up? I called bullshit. So, I'm doing my tasks with him, and he starts talking to me. I mean really talking about things he remembers from his past. Things I never heard him talk about. I'm just going along with it. Trying not to think too much about what his wife said. Then he turns to me and says, as he usually says it. Man, I have to poop. Will me on into the bathroom, baby. I have to shit. I will him towards the toilet. Put the brakes on the wheelchair, and was about to help him when he suddenly stood up from his chair, took a few steps, turned, and sat on the toilet. I could only gape. I had no idea what the duck I just saw. This man, the last I saw him, was on a steady decline. He couldn't get up from his chair without major assistance. Yet he popped up out of that thing like he's been faking it this whole time. He saw my face and told me. Yeah, I've been walking. I'm doing good, baby. I don't know, guys. I really don't know. This didn't convert me, honestly. Christ would have to show himself to me to get me believing, yet I can't explain this. There is no cure for this disease. People in this state don't just progress positively like that without new and aggressive treatment. I'm still bothered and shaken by this. Honestly, I wish this was the weirdest experience. Thanks for listening. And letting me get this out of my head. I appreciate it. Does anyone have an explanation? I'm leaning towards the power of suggestion. But even that seems like a stretch. To be completely honest, nothing happened to me, so I only have stories from other coworkers. I live in Mexico, and the place was an educational center mostly for kids with autism but also some other neurodivergent conditions like Williams. A woman whose son had autism founded the project as an altruistic initiative, primarily relying on donations for its funding. At that time, the building housing the center was a large old house that they either borrowed or rented for a very low cost. I'm unsure about this detail. The house was used as a school, but only kindergarten furniture was added. The bedrooms and other rooms with doors were classrooms. A small room that may have been a closet was an office for one of the head psychologists. The kitchen and dining room were where we took the kids for lunch, and the garden was a playground. I was an assistant to a teacher with a large group of 6 kids, but they didn't have the resources to hire more teachers. When they decided to hire some assistants, including me, the school had already been active for some years, so it was the teachers who told us the stories. It all started with some of the kids making comments like, "I don't want to go there. I don't like the angry man staring at me," or "Look, the angry man is at the window again," while pointing at one of the classroom windows from the playground. One of the head psychologists got very freaked out one day when she saw a woman who looked very similar to one of the teachers, thin with long brown hair, walking inside a classroom, and followed her there as she had something to discuss, only to realize the classroom was empty after she entered it. They informed us of additional events, however, my recollection of them is limited, as they occurred more than 10 years ago. The most intriguing part was that they had a staff breakfast in the garden, the playground. One of the teachers had a friend come over with her, and this friend was energy sensitive, so he told her there was something wrong with that house. He pointed to the same window the kids used to mention and said the same thing. "There's an angry man looking at us from that window." He requested to explore the house and informed them that a tragic event had occurred there, involving an upset man and a sad woman, with the energy from that event still lingering in the house. After that and some other happenings, the principal/founder ended up bringing a medium to the house/school, and the medium basically repeated what the teacher's friend, the energy-sensitive guy, had told them. Subsequently, a tragic event, likely a murder, occurred, but the medium remained unaware of what the other guy had said. She also did some cleansing rituals on the house, but some teachers claimed they sometimes heard weird noises when alone or still had some of their kids making weird comments from time to time. I only worked there for 6 months while I waited for a particular college program I was going to attend to be started, so probably that's why I never got to experience anything creepy while working there, not that I would have liked to. The school is no longer located at that house. At some point someone donated a larger piece of land to them so that they could make their own building, and now they are located there. Ghosts in the workplace. I used to manage a dry cleaner in Streatham, London. We were open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., but after 3 p.m. all of the other staff would go home, leaving myself or whoever was on shift alone to serve customers and close the shop. London being London, we had a motion sensor door chime that'd ring whenever somebody would open/close the door, and CCTV set up to watch the door and front counter. There was a monitor at the back of the shop so you could check the CCTV before going to serve customers. My normal routine would be to grab a coffee, a newspaper, and a bite to eat as 3 p.m. approached, knowing that once everyone left at 3 p.m., I'd be unable to leave the shop unattended. I'd sit and read in the back of the shop and listen to the radio. If a customer came in the door, it would chime, and as I approached the front of the shop, I'd glance up at the CCTV just to make sure it wasn't a gang of hoodlums waiting. So I'm sitting there one evening reading the paper when I hear a thud at the front counter. I glance up at the CCTV, and there's a man standing at the counter. I immediately get up and start walking towards the front, wondering if I'd missed the door chime somehow, and I have another glance up at the CCTV. The man was still standing there. He was standing perfectly still, hands down by his side, which was unusual. Usually people either came in carrying a bunch of clothes, came in and started going through their bags/pockets looking for a collection ticket, or would stand and shift their weight around from side to side. I pause for a few seconds to watch this guy on the monitor, and he isn't moving at all. He looked more like a cardboard cutout than a living, breathing person. Anyway, I walk the 4 or 5 steps to the front counter, turn the corner. And there's nobody there. The door was firmly closed. The motion sensor hadn't rung. I tested the motion sensor by opening the door, and it was working fine. Weird, right? Well, it gets even weirder. The next day I'm talking to a colleague, and I mention that the motion sensor might be broken, so keep an eye on the CCTV. She asks why I think it might be broken, so I tell her about what had happened the night before. Her eyes go wide open, we have a little chat, and she tells me that she's seen exactly the same man on a few occasions. Never activating the doorbell. Just standing there perfectly still with his arms by his side. I worked there for another 3 or 4 years but never saw him again after that. I worked in a huge hospital that had multiple buildings and big parking lots. Staff had to park in a lot that was a hike at the best of times and a pain in the ass in bad weather. But at least the buildings were connected by an underground walkway. I started around 7 a.m. and got there early to avoid commuter traffic. Which meant I was usually in the underground walkway alone after 6 a.m. It was, for sure, over 400 feet long. The hallway had those metal doors at intervals, with push bars and glass that had metal grids in them, like schools had. Many times I'd be there before the maintenance staff, who would unlock the doors in the hallway. This meant that I would be unable to access my workspace and would have to wait in the hallway until the maintenance staff came down the hall to unlock the doors. Otherwise, I have to go back to the beginning and walk upstairs through the hospital corridors. There were probably connecting ways to get upstairs, but I didn't know how. One time I was in the underground hallway and walking to my workspace. Noticed a guy a couple hundred feet in front of me, outside a huge white door. No idea where that led to. Hospitals have a ton of doors. As I continued walking, I noticed he was just standing there, facing the other wall, but in the blink of an eye, he suddenly disappeared. Right in front of my view, he's gone. Okay, whatever, that was strange. There were no other doors right there he could have ducked into. Finally get up to where he was standing, and keep on going to my desk. Some days or weeks later, it's raining out, and one of my coworkers comes in wet. I asked her why she didn't take the lower hallway, and she said she won't walk down there because strange things have happened. When I asked for more information, she explained that she has worked there for years and that many coworkers have reported seeing people standing outside the door before vanishing in an instant. What door? The big white door? Yes, she says that's the morgue door, and she's having none of that after seeing someone blink out of existence as she was walking down that hallway. I casually asked other workers if that was the morgue door, and they confirmed. Yikes. But I kept using the hallway anyway. I'm not going to walk in the rain or snow. Ghosts, please get out of my way. I've got places to be and things to do. I'm never going into the forest again at night. My seasonal employment contract has been renewed as a park ranger at the Sequoia National Park. My job is fairly simple. Where I work the graveyard shift for 6 months out of the year, and I primarily make sure that no one is messing with the giant sequoia trees, hunting, or camping illegally. The hardest part of my job is staying awake, because now that I'm 33 years old, I'm finding it harder and harder to stay awake past midnight. The forest plays tricks on my mind sometimes, where I swear I'll see something, and when I go investigate, I discover that there's actually nothing there. It's the beginning of August, and the weather is unseasonably cold at night. I tried to take a nap before coming into work tonight, but all I did was toss and turn for several hours. As I drove close to the General Sherman tree, which is the largest tree per volume in the world, I squinted my eyes because it looked like a group of people were walking up towards the tree. I park my truck and follow a good distance behind the group of people. The moonlight is bright enough that I could see that there are about 6 people that are short in stature with stocky builds. They all have long black hair and are wearing what looks like animal pelts for clothing. I'm not sure if these people are part of some type of cult or something else, as 2 of them are carrying a larger object that is wrapped in a blanket that looks to be over 5 feet long. I keep my distance from what I determine to be a group of men, and I don't intervene because they outnumber me 6-1, and so far they haven't done anything harmful to the forest. My job is fairly simple, but if anything happens to the General Sherman tree on my watch or any of the other trees that are thousands of years old, then I could be held criminally negligent for not performing my required job duties. The 6 men stop at the General Sherman tree, and the 2 men put the object they were carrying down on the wood fence post that acts as a tourist barrier around the tree. It's 1:30 a.m., and the forest is dead silent besides whatever noise these people are making. I notice that the object that is wrapped in a blanket is flailing around, as it might be a deer or an elk, but I can't tell because it's wrapped in the blanket. The 6 men all cross over the wooden fence posts, as I cower behind a nearby sequoia tree out of sight from them. Something doesn't feel right with what's going on, but I'm too afraid to radio for help for fear that they might hear me. 2 of the men unwrap the blanket, and I'm shocked to see that it's a man tied up. The men start to do a ceremonial chant around the General Sherman tree as it becomes abundantly clear that the 6 men are a part of a Native American tribe. Even with the Native American chants, I can still hear the white man moaning through whatever is stuffed in his mouth. Whatever is going on doesn't look good as I radio my coworker Rick. "Rick, it's me, Ted. Come in," I say in my lowest voice possible. After a few seconds, I don't hear anything, so I radio him again. "Rick, listen, it's me, Ted. I need to talk to you right now." Again I wait a few more seconds, and I don't hear anything. I'm extremely afraid, as I can't stop my legs from shaking. Obviously there's some type of criminal act going on, which includes kidnapping at the very least, and if these Native Americans see or hear me, then I'll likely be tied up as well. "What's up, Ted? It's me, Rick." I hear it in the lowest possible setting on my radio. "Listen, Rick, I'm here looking at the General Sherman tree, and there's something really bizarre going on. I really need you to come down here as quickly as possible." I whisper in my lowest possible tone while still being able to be heard. "I can, but it'll take me 20 to 30 minutes to get there." "That's fine. But hurry up." The vigor of the Native American chant seems to pick up as if they were at a Rage Against the Machine concert. I can see the man on the ground flailing around more aggressively, as he can sense something bad is about to happen. Just when the Native Americans are at the pinnacle of their aggressiveness when it comes to circling the tree and chanting, they all decide to stop where the white man is on the ground, which is also where there's a natural opening in the tree that is easily 6 feet in height. As I look around the forest, I confirm that most sequoia trees have this same natural opening. One of the Native Americans, who might be the designated leader or their medicine man but is definitely the most vocal, then faces the tree and puts both of his hands up to the sky. The 5 other natives, at this point, are now on their knees with their hands stretched out forwards on the ground. The Native American leader continues to perform his sermon with such vigor that it could only be matched by a WWF wrestler from back in the 80s. I'm doing everything possible not to pee my pants, as deep down inside, I know I should be doing something, but I also know that I have no chance of confronting the 6 men, who are deep into their ritual. Just as the leader hits his highest chants, I see lightning and hear thunder in the sky, which is a bit rare in these parts of the woods and can cause a forest fire because of the natural dryness of the area. As the lightning and thunder continue, the vocal leader stops chanting as 2 of the Native Americans pick up the man off the ground. The man is really flailing around now, like a shark out of water, and his moans are as loud as a professional tennis star during a serve. The 2 men place the man inside the tree opening as the thunder and lightning really seem to intensify. "Stop it!" I yell out at the top of my lungs. The 6 Native Americans look around to see where my yell came from. I get as low to the tree as possible to get out of sight as I start to see 5 of the men cross back over the wooden protective fence posts, as the one vocal leader remains by the opening of the tree with his hands raised up into the sky. I continue to press myself as close and low to the tree as possible, as I can hear the men trying to find me. My heart is now beating uncontrollably through my chest as I need Rick or some type of miracle to save me. After what feels like an eternity but was probably no more than a few minutes, the Native American vocal leader yells something out, and the 5 men come back towards him. My breathing starts to slow down, as my mind is still overwhelmed with the panic that I had just endured. I peek to the side of the tree, and I see the Native Americans all touching the General Sherman tree with both of their hands as the thunder and lightning continue their orchestral display of violence in the sky. Then a few seconds later they release their hands from the tree as the thunder and lightning abruptly stop. All 6 of them climb back over the wooden fence posts and walk into the forest. I wait a minute until I know for sure that they're gone, then I cautiously walk towards the tree. I make sure the Native Americans are out of sight, and I head towards the opening of the tree, where the man was placed inside. As I get closer to the tree, I don't see the man in the opening of the tree. What the hell? I say out loud. I continue to look up and down the opening, but the only things I see are 2 pieces of rope and a piece of cloth that I'm guessing was shoved in his mouth. At this time, I see Rick's park ranger truck pull in with his blue and red flashing lights on. It takes him a couple of minutes to walk towards the General Sherman tree, so I walk around the tree to see where that man might have gone, and I still see no sign of him. Ted, what's up? You're never going to believe this, but there was some type of Indian sacrifice that just happened here, I said in a hurried voice, when I still hadn't caught my breath. What do you mean sacrifice? Rick responds in an unbelievable tone. There were 6 Native American men who carried this guy here. They did this ritual where they chanted around the tree and eventually stopped in front of this opening of the tree. Then 5 of them got on their knees as one of them did some type of prayer chant. Did you hear the thunder and lightning? Well, yeah, I did. As the thunderstorm intensified, they placed the tied-up man inside the opening of the tree. I was hiding over there behind that tree, and I yelled out for them to stop, but they never removed the guy from this tree. So then, where is he? Rick asks me. The tree engulfed him. What? Rick looks at me with skepticism. Rick, I'm telling you I saw the whole thing unfold with my own 2 eyes. There's even the rope that was used to tie his hands and feet together. Ted, listen to me. You look really tired. If you tell this story to Marty, our supervisor, he'll probably fire you. Trees don't eat people. Think how asinine that sounds. As Rick says that to me, he looks at me in a pathetic state. I know what I saw, but I don't feel like arguing with Rick because I'm really tired. I do radio Marty to ask him if I can leave early, where he obliges as I take Rick's advice and intentionally leave out the part of what I observed at the General Sherman tree. I am now extremely spooked out by these woods as I drive back to my car. I really don't want to ever work the graveyard shift again. I had an experience at work I wanted to share. So for context, I work in a hospital doing ancillary work. I'm not a tech, an aide, or anything else, but I help nurses as part of my job. I have had several unusual experiences there. However, I would like to share this particular incident, which occurred on Monday, 5 days ago. I get to the unit I'm on most of the day, it's only like 7 a.m. still, and I'm walking with this nurse to the nourishment room. One of our coworkers recently had a kid and likes to bring her by early in the morning to visit sometimes. Her pediatrician is next door, so she comes by after appointments to see everyone. In any case, the nurse accompanying me hears her baby from around the corner, or so I believed. We both heard a baby cry. I know the nurse did because she legit panicked and went into mother mode and checked every room around us with me and checked every cupboard to make sure there wasn't an actual baby trapped. All empty. No patients in any of them either. She went to check the emergency stairs, and I heard it again, this time from what sounded like inside the wall, muffled. I turned around, and the aide who had just sat down at the desk had heard it that time, too. All the rooms in that part of the unit were empty, discharged the night before, ready to fill right back up. There was no baby in any of the rooms on the unit either. Our mother and baby unit is in another building. I saw a transporter dropping off a new patient and asked him if there was a baby, but he said there was none. Anywhere. Our unit used to be the maternity ward before the new building went up. Apparently our night crew has heard this before. During my time in nursing school, I completed my psychiatric clinical rotation at a hospital that was constructed in the early 1800s. It was used for a stretch of time as a sulfur bath hospital for mentally ill patients, whatever that means. I think it was called a sanatorium. Some areas of the hospital were marked as off-limits/abandoned, allowing you to look through a window and see the old nuns' quarters, which contained books and random objects, suggesting that closing those sections of the hospital was unplanned. Apparently, the hospital's staff was well aware of its haunting reputation. Staff would tell lots of stories about feeling someone step on the elevator with them or even seeing a person on the video monitor in one of the locked units who wasn't actually in the room. I took all of this with a grain of salt and thought they were messing with me. One day, a staff member took me down to the old abandoned morgue in the basement for fun, as it was rumored that a famous rapper had filmed a music video there due to its creepy atmosphere. There were square openings in the wall where the dead bodies used to be placed. It was all shitty and old looking, and it looked literally almost like a creepy cave that had been carved out for hospital purposes. After this tour, I had finished my psych clinical duties earlier that day than all my fellow students. We had to use a key that was signed out to us to go down this long, dark corridor in the other unused area of the hospital reserved for students, where we would have a post-clinical day meeting with the teacher to discuss our shifts before going home. Since I was done early and the other students weren't back yet, I decided it was a great time to try to poop in the bathroom there, because, privacy. I entered the bathroom at the end of the long dark corridor, which required a key to access, knowing that no one else would be there, and began to relieve myself. Well, I obviously hear voices outside the door but can't make out what they're saying. It sounds like laughter, reminiscent of a girl from my class. So I'm like, okay. They must have finished clinical work early too. Guess I don't get to poop until I get home. Fine. And I walk out of the bathroom and sit in the small classroom right outside of it. And, no one was there. Not my classmates, not my teacher, not staff. Literally nobody. Nobody could have gotten in and out of the locked door at the end of the dark corridor in that period of time either. So I hightailed my ass down to the parking lot and sat in my car for 45 minutes until I knew for sure my classmates would be in that locked area, lol. And I never went to the dark, locked corridor alone for the rest of that clinical rotation. I would like to share some experiences I had while working at a nursing home. I would like to preface this by saying up until I experienced these things, I did not believe in the paranormal. I was raised Christian but was never particularly religious. Like most people, my first experience in the medical field was at a nursing home, and it was an absolutely shit tier one. Shit tier nursing homes are great first-time medical jobs because the turnover rate is so high they don't care if you have experience. As long as you have all your licenses and certs, they will hire you. I did not, however, expect to have my first paranormal experiences along with my first hands-on medical job. The first few months, nothing unusual happened. I worked the night shift, and it was not uncommon to be given 20 to 30 residents to take care of, which is highly illegal, so most of the time even if something weird happened, I would be too busy to notice. There was an old couple who lived in a room together, the only couple in the place, and the husband was declining rapidly, and this brings us to my first encounter with the paranormal. We knew he was probably not going to last the night but hoped he could pull through to the day shift since when a resident dies there is a lot of paperwork involved and we have to prepare the body, etc. The man's wife was hitting the call bell every few minutes, saying that there were people strangling her husband. She was frantic. There was no one in the room besides us. This continued until about 3 a.m. She stopped calling us in, but we could hear her screaming at the people to leave her husband alone and to get off of him. Attempts to console her did not work, and the man died shortly after. For the rest of the time that I worked there, about a year, this woman would talk to the people, as she called them, in her room, and it was very creepy. This did not happen before her husband died. She was totally normal before that, so I did not know what to make of this. Many times I would work the dementia unit. I would be by myself with around 20 or so people with dementia. The doors to the unit were heavy and used an electronic lock to keep the patients from wandering off, so I was really alone. Now, it is well known that people with dementia see things that aren't there, so I won't bore you with those types of stories. We are going to talk about a specific room on this unit. For HIPAA reasons, I can't say the actual number of the room, so we will call it Room 7. Room 7 was cursed. Any resident that got placed in Room 7 would die within 3 weeks. They wouldn't just die, though. Their entire personality would change within a couple of days of getting there. I worked with residents in other parts of the home who were as normal as a demented person could be while waiting for a unit to open. Unfortunately for them, Room 7 was usually where the opening was. People who lived in that room would scream at night, become combative, refuse their medicine, and forget how to talk. I have no explanation for this. I looked all over that room for mold and poor air quality but could find nothing. When it was empty, if I walked by it, the hairs on the back of my neck would stand up, and I would always shut the door. I know these are kind of long-winded, and I'm sketchy on some details because this was several years ago, but if you all like these, I have a few more to tell. Also, if you have an explanation for these experiences, please share them with me. Thank you. I work as a state officer at a very old mental hospital. Archaeological finds date people being there starting around the year 300, maybe earlier. It was a fort during the early 1800s with a powder arsenal, officer barracks, and 2 old prisons, one used during the 1800s and one only recently closed down, which still stand. The arsenal is a museum, and they use the barracks as offices. It was established as a mental hospital in 1879. I have witnessed, along with other officers and ward staff, many unusual things, from seeing people on a security feed only to check it out and there will be no one there, to witnessing doors open on their own and hearing walking, voices, or screams. Oddly enough, anyone with any time there is pretty numb to it. We aren't very happy about it, but we are so used to it that we have learned to brush it off. New officers or ward staff tend to need someone to calm them down. I'll tell a couple of my creepiest events. I work nights and rotate post positions, so one night my partner and I were assigned to the main control room for our area. We have a huge camera feed, but one has a dedicated monitor for the main vehicle gate that enters the unit. I was working on a report when my partner told me he could see a person on the camera standing outside the fence looking into the control room. I looked out the windows that faced that area and couldn't see anyone, thinking that maybe it was too dark. I checked the feed, and sure as hell, I could see the dark outline of what looked like a man standing outside the fence. I radioed patrol, grabbed my flashlight, and went outside into the gated area to shine my light through the fence at the spot where the person should have been standing on the other side. There was no one there, so I called my partner, and he said he still saw them on the camera feed and could see me and my light shining into the area. I told him to switch with me, I was coming back in. Don't take his eyes off the camera. I come back in, and sure as hell someone is still there, but the whole time it's just a black shadow. Patrol comes around before he can walk out and shines the spotlight in the area, and radios they have no visual, but we can still see something or someone on the feed. We both go out while the patrol is looking in that area and cannot see anything. When we come back in, whatever it was is now gone. We still cannot explain it. Second story, I'm on patrol one night, and we have these old guard towers that we use for restroom breaks and to heat up our lunch and eat in. Well, one night nature called with a real sense of urgency, and the closest tower that I have a key for was the one all the officers call the haunted tower. Now this area is supposedly haunted, not just the tower, it sits on the back of the hospital right off the edge of a pine forest. To reach the tower, you need to follow these directions, and I'm not joking when I say this is how the other officers would guide you. Take a right at the haunted corner, go straight, and you will see the haunted tower on top of the hill. So I'm at the point of nature's call that I'm seriously considering running lights and sirens. I get to the tower, do the awkward waddle up the stairs, unlock the door, and do the will he make it? Shuffle to the toilet. So the tower is just one big open room with windows and just a thick shower curtain around the toilet to allow a slight semblance of hospital room privacy. So I'm sitting there in the dark because I was too busy taking my duty belt, regular belt, and pants down to be bothered with such modern conveniences. While I was relieving myself by moonlight as God intended, the curtain, which was right in front of my face, suddenly pinched and pulled outward as if someone had snatched it. Thinking that maybe I had rudely interrupted someone's lunch and they were letting me know, I went to grab my flashlight. However, I figured out that during my fit of passion I had dropped the duty belt with said flashlight by the door. Luckily I remembered that such things exist on my cell phone. I reached in my pocket and turned on my light and unleashed the power of a single blinding LED into the void. But no one was there, so thinking maybe it was caused by a draft, I went back to the business at hand. Right as I'm about to wrap things up by doing the necessary paperwork, I see the curtain move quickly by my left foot and suddenly feel what I can only describe as a hand grab my ankle and pull with enough force that my foot comes up off the ground and my cheeks squeak. I'm telling you right now, if there was an Olympic ass wiping event, I would have gone home with the gold medal and had a ticker tape parade when I got home. I have never been so scared in all my life, and I now understand why no officer will ever step foot in that tower at night. I can't explain, I've been back during daylight hours trying to rationalize and even recreate it. I literally have to tell this story using humor because it shook me up so bad. Don't take the night shift. I was never, what you would call, a night owl, more of a recluse. You see, I find comfort in my solitude, that's why the night shift appealed to me so much. There's something quite liberating about it, something tranquil. It's almost as if you're in a parallel universe where everything just seems different. It's nice. I work as a night guard at my local shopping center. It's deep in the suburbs, so the only trouble I ever really come across is the occasional fox trying to get into the bins. I essentially just get paid to count the seconds down until 4 a.m., when my shift ends. There isn't much more to it. After all, a shopping center that's devoid of activity is a shopping center that's devoid of concern, right? Perhaps the only discouraging aspect of it is the mannequins. They terrify me, but unfortunately, in a dimly lit shopping center, they stick out like a sore thumb. There's nothing normal about some vacant imitation of a human. It feels like they look into you with a hollow glare, which lingers in your mind before darting down the back of your spine. Their blank facade creates the impression of an unearthly human, a shadow of the people who occupy the center during the day. I know they aren't real, but I never feel truly alone when I'm in the presence of a mannequin. I swear I've even seen one move out of the corner of my eye, but I attribute that to the darkness playing tricks on my mind. I've been doing this job for about a year now, and part of what mitigates my paranoia around the mannequins is the drive home. I often find myself on the road as the sun begins to break the horizon. It's quite a beautiful thing to see the world waking up, especially after you've finished your shift. It sort of indicates revitalization, rebirth if you will. This customary moment of brief bliss is what alleviates any troubled thoughts I have. There's nothing like it. It's my daily detox. However, an incident occurred during my morning drive home, leaving a lasting impression on my mind. And the more I think about it, the more it infects me with fear. My night shift had just come to an end. I knew this because Oscar, the daytime security guard, had just arrived. I checked my watch. 3:56 a.m. Sunset was at 4:27 this morning, so I had just over 30 minutes of driving before I would be rid of any distressing thoughts. I began to walk towards my car, tossing the master set of keys to Oscar as we crossed paths, to which he responded with an unenthusiastic, "Thanks." He must have cycled to work, as my car stood alone in the desolate car park. It was situated directly underneath an overhanging street lamp, illuminated by its dull, amber glow. Once I had gotten in the car, I eagerly rammed my keys into the ignition and resuscitated it, avid for the replenishing journey home. I glanced at the shopping center one last time to see Oscar smoking a cigarette by the main entrance, and I noticed that the fire exit was slightly ajar. We locked eyes for a moment. "The fire exit's open," I announced. He gestured his hand at me as if he were saying, "On it," and reluctantly turned towards the door. The ember of his cigarette was playfully dancing with the motion of his hand. How hadn't I checked the fire exit? I decided to take the forest highway instead of my usual journey through the town. I had never taken this route before, but it had just been reopened after a year-long closure, so I figured, why not? It's quite a scenic route anyway. 50 miles of thick forest split in two by a freshly pathed road. The scene was reminiscent of a picturesque postcard. The heart of the forest was dismal, with trees that towered over the road. I checked my watch. 4:08 a.m. Something didn't feel right, but I couldn't pinpoint what it was. There was a distinct aura that made me feel like I was in the shopping center. I don't know why. Maybe the trees reminded me of the mannequins, an inanimate unity that seemingly watches your every move. But it felt more like there was something about to happen. Whatever it was, it kept me vigilant and alert. The thought of a forest sunrise was far from my mind. It wasn't hot, but it was humid enough for a layer of mist to latch onto the tarmac and linger between the trees on either side of me, almost as if it was waiting for something, or someone. I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't unnerved. My knuckles were white at the wheel, but it was only 19 minutes until sunrise, and turning back would have taken just as long as continuing onwards. So I carried on, heedless of my thoughts. Maintaining a steady speed of 60 miles per hour, I diverted my attention to the broken, yellow dashes in the road. It was quite satisfying, actually, to see vivid strikes of amber yellow come and go out of the beam of my headlights. As well as this, the road itself was incredibly smooth. This all comforted me, and for a moment I felt relieved. But, unfortunately, this was short-lived. The forest had sinister plans for me. As I approached a fork in the road, my headlights suddenly deserted the car, and I was engulfed in darkness. I slammed on the brakes. Believe me, the last thing I wanted to do was stop, but I just couldn't carry on in the dark. When my car came to a halt, I was greeted with my paranoia. My heart began to pump blood through every vein in my body, prompting me to take quick breaths and dilate my pupils. Slowly, but surely, I loosened my grip on the wheel, unhinged my seatbelt, and opened the car door. My feet met the tarmac and subsequently shifted the mist, leaving a marked circle of lucidity around them. The road felt hard yet fragile, like one big sheet of ice, and as my breath met the air, it turned into a haze of mist, which eventually settled with the fog that loitered around me. Stepping out of the car was no easy task. I was practically hugging it as I approached the hood and popped it open. I glanced at my watch. 4:14 a.m. The sky was violet, with a hint of the sun on the horizon that tinted it with a deep azure. I stared at the labyrinth of mechanics before me and was overcome with distress. Nothing made sense. Frantically trying to breathe some life into the bulbs, I flipped unfamiliar switches and shook an array of tubes, but to no avail. I'm a security guard, not a mechanic, after all. I remember toying with the idea of walking the rest of the route, but who was I kidding? There was no way I was going to do that. It can't have been that long before I heard it. It came from the forest, the all too familiar sound of footsteps. They were moving at an irregular pace, snapping twigs and crunching leaves with every step. I cautiously veered my eyes towards the sound to see what appeared to be the silhouette of a human wandering within the dense forest. A human. Someone who could help me. I was in need of someone who could rescue me from this traumatic situation. "Hey!" I called out, unsuccessfully. It just kept ambling on. "Hey! Help me!" I persisted, but it was apparent that it couldn't hear me. So, I drastically walked towards it. From the vast, open road, I stepped into the murky, confined forest. There were about 30 yards between us, and I was closing that distance with a steady stride, despite the sea of trees that hindered my progress. I kept on calling out, again and again, but it would not stop walking away from me. It was clear that it just hadn't heard me yet. Edging closer, another sound accompanied the footsteps, a muffled voice. It was unintelligible, but it sounded familiar, like the voice of someone that I knew, yet I couldn't make out any words, let alone who it was. It got to the point where I was within 10 feet of it, close enough for me to call it out and be heard. "Hello?" It immediately stopped. There was a subsequent flood of silence, which was as thick as the mist around us. It filled my ears with alarm, which unearthed the rhythmic pulse of my heart. The thing in front of me was lifeless. It was chalk white, from head to toe, with limbs that were freakishly slender, with fork-like fingers hanging off the end of its arms. With a stiff motion, it rotated its head to reveal a face, or what was left of one. It had no mouth, no nose, no eyes, and no ears. Instead, there was just a smooth facade of a head, the ghost of a face. There was a moment where it was just looking at me, like a lion observing its prey. Somehow, despite the lack of eyes, I could feel its empty glare latching onto me. It was both immobilizing and hypnotic. I was transfixed. The glare soon became a beam, as two openings of light appeared where its eyes should have been. They were like headlights, in which I was just a deer. The harsh light burrowed into my skull and made its way through my spine. It was less painful than it was stimulating, but I was overcome by it all as it began to spread to every pore in my body. I could see the thing was right in front of me. It was expressionless, but I could also feel it tunneling through me. It settled in my chest, an erratic form of energy that felt like a ball of lead. Beyond the beam of light that coated my vision, I could see the thing's face beginning to shift and stir. It was morphing. Two holes appeared in the center of its head, followed by a pointed mount, which shaped them into nostrils, a nose. Then, like the slash of an open wound, a sliver of red materialized below it, a pair of ruby lips. The outline of ears started to emerge from the sides of its head. They grew like tumors, both deformed and unpredictable. What was in front of me was the culmination of a face. It looked hauntingly familiar, but the light shone too bright for me to infer anything. I must have been debilitated in this trance for about 15 minutes, as the sun finally surfaced from its slumber. This could only mean one thing. 4:27 a.m. Sunlight seeped through the trees like honey, decorating the mist and painting the trunks with a pastel amber color. It eventually reached us, casting a layer of illumination onto the thing's face, subsequently shattering the beam of light that had me in its tenacious trance. All that was left was an outline of its ray, a remnant that glimmered in the morning sun. In due course, my lucidity returned to me. The sunlight unveiled a pair of hazel green eyes and a mop of greasy black hair atop its head. Everything became so clear, so obvious. The face that I had just watched morph into existence was mine. I gravely searched for a hint of delusion but instead was met with the daunting truth. It was me. The thing opened its mouth. "Hello," it proclaimed, with a voice that was an echo of my own. It resonated in my ears, almost taunting me, the discomfort of unwanted familiarity. The moment of revelation had disentombed my adrenaline. I did the only thing that I could think of. I ran, leaping in bounds over the terrain of the forest floor. I didn't look back. I couldn't. I emerged from the forest with the mobility of a newborn fawn, my legs staggering in a frantic attempt to escape what I had just encountered. It didn't take long to reach my car, but when I got there, I instinctively closed the bonnet and scrambled into the seat. The car was still turned on, and, lo and behold, the headlights glistened onto the irradiated tarmac. There was no time to muse on this. I hit the gas and sped off. But my curiosity beseeched me to peer at the thing as I drove past it. It hadn't moved. It just followed me with that hollow glare, staring at me with my own eyes. Wearing my face like a mask, this experience brings me to the present moment. I've been glued to my bed all day, as paralyzed as I was in the forest, watching morning descend to evening. I can't think straight, I just keep on seeing its face, my face. I'm haunted by my visage. The night shift is slowly approaching, and I've found myself staring into the face of uncertainty. All I know is that it's out there, I'm out there, and I don't know what I'm going to do. Strange happening at work. I'm a 22-year-old white male. I work as a night supervisor at a busy gas station in a large city. Thankfully, the city has a low crime rate, and most of our customers are the friendly type. But as any retail employee can tell you, that doesn't mean it isn't the safest place to work. I'm about 5 feet 9 inches and on the stocky side. I know a fair amount of self-defense, and I always carry a pocket knife and sometimes a tactical pen in case of emergency. Now I live in a century-old church, and due to that and my hobby of listening to scary stories, I really don't scare easily. But what happened that night at work still haunts me, as I can't find any logical explanations for it. It was a normal closing shift the majority of the night. My station closes at 11 p.m., and due to store policy, I and another coworker had just locked up for the night, and we were busy doing the final cleaning jobs for the night. My coworker finished his half of the job and soon moved over to our kitchen. I stayed by our cooler and continued to organize the cans of energy drinks. That's when I heard it. A very loud sneeze. I called out to my worker, saying, "Excuse you." My coworker immediately responded, "Wait, that wasn't you?" "No." I soon saw his 6 feet 9 inches frame fill the entrance to the kitchen, and with a worried look on his face, he said, "Was there anyone outside?" While I hadn't been watching the door too closely, it was highly unlikely that someone would be walking by the door that late at night. I quickly suggest we search the store, and we check every possible hiding place only to find nothing. We both were weirded out at that point and quickly decided to leave a little early. The next day I checked with our security officer, who said he didn't see anything strange on the cameras that night and there wasn't anyone outside, which I figured, as the noise was too clear to have come from outside. It was almost like the sneezer was right next to both of us at the same time even though we were on different sides of the store. I know this seems silly, but it's the sheer fact that we both heard it loud and clear and neither of us can find a rational explanation for it. Since then we haven't heard anything like it again. However, we recently had a new hire join our team, and she has claimed to have heard voices several times. I'm hoping this isn't going to become a common occurrence. If it does, I will probably have more stories to share. Security guard story. Back in 2016, I was working as a security guard, and I was still one of the best guards this company had. Anyway, my sergeant called me to work at a site that nobody else wanted due to fear of the location or other concerns. It was an empty hotel with 2 levels and 30+ rooms. It was near the end of town. The closest signs of life were 3/4 mile in any direction. It was all dark because the shift started from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. The only sources of light were the road lights directly in front of us and the gas station located 3/4 mile away. My superior, Sergeant, was a considerably large individual, standing at 6 feet 8 inches and exceeding 400 pounds, whereas I was of average stature at 5 feet 10 inches and weighing 220 pounds. It was our first time at the site, for both of us. So we start walking around the building, and he explains to me why we had to guard it and the history behind it. We both have flashlights, so I am shining them in the hotel windows and trying the doors. My sergeant laughed when I did this, saying no one is here and all doors are locked. We approach the end of our search, where it is darkest and nearly back to where we began. Anyway, one of the doors popped open like it had been unlocked the whole time. He didn't want to go. You see fear in this person's eyes. Anyway, I go in and look around, and I hear him whimpering, telling me to come back to him. He has a gun, and I don't, so I don't understand why I'm afraid. After I confirmed it was safe, I came out. As soon as we finished the round, which was just before 9:30, he left, saying he would return to check on me in 4 hours. However, during the 3 nights I worked at that site, I never saw him again and later learned that he quit that night. Paranormal hospital. I've had several paranormal experiences in my lifetime, both personally and professionally. I'm going to discuss the professional paranormal experiences in this story. I was a surgical technologist in labor and delivery for about 10 years. I worked for a not-for-profit Catholic hospital for almost 4 years out of that 10. When I first started in the department, 2 techs that had already worked there for a very long time, we'll call them M and J, and myself, K, told me stories about Sister Mary Margaret, who was a surgery tech back when the hospital was still run by nuns. Needless to say, Sister Mary Margaret was very much by the book and left little room for her coworkers' errors. Jay knew about Sister Mary Margaret, but M had worked there so long? She'd actually worked with the nun. M began to tell tales about instances when she'd heard Sister Mary Margaret in the OR suite long after she'd passed away and up to the current time frame. Being a born skeptic? I thought M and J were just hazing the new girl. I wasn't buying a bit of their nonsense. Well, fast forward to when I'm off of orientation and working my 12-hour night shifts. I'd be in the back, setting up the OR suite or stocking supplies, and I could hear the shuffle of shoe covers. Just as high heels make the clack-clack sound? There is a very distinct sound shoe covers make when they shuffle along the hospital floor. I just sleuthed it out and figured M and or J put one of the night shift nurses up to pranking me just to see if I'd fall for it. Well, I just had to hop out there, catch them in the act, and let them know they weren't fooling anybody. So, I popped out into the hallway, ready to scare the scrub pants off of whomever was pranking me, but when I jumped out into the hallway, no one was there. There was no movement in the hallway, swinging of the doors, chatter on the intercoms, nothing. Needless to say, I was really perplexed. So, that first incident just kind of got a shrug from me, and I went on working. As time passed, these incidents became more and more frequent. We had more new employees, and M and J were training them. M and her new orientee had an incident where sterile supplies were on the OR bed, and a bulb syringe floated from the top of the supply pile at a 90-degree angle for about a minute and then just dropped to the floor. I really began believing them when they relayed that story to me during the report. I could tell they were both honestly shaken up by the ordeal, and I actually felt pretty bad for them. They were scared. Trust me, these two were not actresses. There was no way they could have given such an Oscar-worthy performance. I continued having my own encounters with shuffling shoe covers and unintelligible whispering, all of the hallmarks of a typical haunting. Some of my tech coworkers continued reporting the same kind of activity. None of the activity was as egregious as what M and her orientee experienced with the floating bulb syringe in midair. When did this all stop being amusing to me? When I went to the OR suite at about 2:30 to 3 a.m. to stock linens and sterile water and saline into the warmer. I'd done this 100 times. It wasn't anything new. For those of you not familiar with hospital warmers, they are the equivalent of leaving the hospital and going straight to Narnia. These miraculous inventions are what make your hospital blankets so nice and toasty. We also put sterile water and saline in the top portion of the warmer to heat up liquids used externally so the patient doesn't get hypothermic. To give you a visual, it literally looks like an industrial-sized stainless steel refrigerator. It performs in the same way except instead of making everything cold, it warms everything up. Thus, the hospital warmer. I had taken the linen cart and some water and saline bottles with me to stock up on everything. I left the cart in the hallway outside of our 2 surgical suites. The warmer was in between both OR suites and a little cubby beside our crash cart. As you very well know, hospitals are known for migraine-inducing bright light. This was one of a few things that I disliked about working in a hospital. Whenever I was able, I'd spare the blinding fluorescent lights as much as possible. So, I proceeded to stock the warmer without turning lights on to spare myself the glare whenever I could. The OR suites were darkened and shadowy, but I could easily see to get around. I'm sure everyone familiar with refrigerators/freezers already is aware that the refrigerator part is pretty cold and the freezer part is, obviously, frozen cold. The warmers at a hospital basically work on the same premise. The refrigerator part warms the blankets, while the freezer part makes the external water and saline bottles really toasty. That's exactly what we want. So, I open the refrigerator part and expect to be hit in the face with some pretty arid heat. It was cold. Wait. What? Is it broken? It has to be. There's no way this warmer could be this cold. Something is not right. Then, I also checked the freezer portion, which should have been even hotter. It was actually colder. Nope. This isn't right. It was not normal for this warmer to be this cold. The fans were blowing warm air, but it just wasn't warming anything up. It was then that I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. I'd never felt that way at the job previously. I turned around and looked up to see a black mist/smoke towards the top of the ceiling. At first I thought maybe some part of the warmer's electric had fizzled out and this was the beginning of a fire. The problem was? The black mist/smoke was on the ceiling and in the opposite corner of the warmer. I looked at the warmer's connections, and everything was as it was supposed to be. There was nothing wrong with the warmer, there was something in that OR suite cubby that was not friendly and rather malevolent. I knew it wasn't Sister Mary Margaret. She'd never do anything menacing. I can't explain how, but I knew not only that it wasn't her, I also knew she wasn't there to help protect me from whatever this was. It was slowly seeping down from the corner of the ceiling towards myself and the warmer. I did what seemed to be the most sensible thing, and I began reciting the Lord's Prayer. It paused, full stop. As I continued, it literally looked like a film being played in reverse. It slinked back to the corner it came from. As soon as it was just about gone, I turned to hustle out of that little cubby area and back to the hallway. I happened to notice when I turned around to face the warmer, it was back to its normal toasty temperature. I didn't ruminate on it long. I just booked it out of the OR suite, to the hallway, and back to the nurse's station. I, until this very story, never said a thing to anyone. I didn't mention my experience to coworkers, friends, or family. I, honestly, didn't want to be ridiculed. I just feel this is a story I'm no longer compelled to keep to myself. There is no harm in sharing it now. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for listening. So, I work in a mental hospital in Norman, Oklahoma, and it's a very old hospital. It's been around for over 100 years, so there have been plenty of deaths during its existence. And I've had some weird experiences in my few months here. Some of my strangest experiences have been hearing voices from areas where no one should be at during the graveyard shift because they're more of where the office work is done. Like one night, I had just walked out of the front door, and as the door was closing, I heard a voice start to ask something along the lines of, "What are you?" But it never finished its sentence, and when I stepped back in and looked around, I found no one there. And then there have been occasions where I've heard screaming or yelling, but nobody but staff was up or in the area. Also, during the overnight shift we usually have around 4 staff members per unit, sometimes more if we have 1:1s, but there have been multiple times where I've seen what I thought was someone walking by, but it couldn't have been because it happened in areas where there wasn't any other staff at the time. It also happens at times when I'm driving into work, because we have a decent stretch of road to get to the main buildings. And something about being outside makes you feel like you're being watched the entire time, and it just sends chills down your spine. So, I was wondering if anyone else who works here has had any similar experiences, or even if people who work in other mental facilities have had non-patient experiences. I worked in the food services division of a large hospital in Jacksonville for a few years. Our kitchen and storage facilities were on the basement floor of the hospital, not coincidentally right next door to and sharing a wall with the morgue, I suppose due to the need for both to have access to large walk-in cooler/freezer areas. I lost count of the number of times I would be alone in these areas at 4 a.m., completely by myself, sometimes locked in a storeroom or other area, doing inventory or preparing orders, and feel as if someone was standing behind or close to me. I would often feel like I could hear someone talking or whispering to me in the complete silence and was occasionally tapped on the shoulder or brushed up against. And it sounds so stereotypical, but I would feel intense cold spots in unrefrigerated areas. We had a paper storage room directly across the hallway from the morgue as well, and I would be in there, very early, getting goods ready for the cafe or to distribute upstairs, and would have a knock on the door, or even creepier, the handle would jiggle violently, and even if I opened the door immediately, the very long and not easy to hide in hallway would be dead silent and empty. A few times I would have my back to this door, and it would open, and I would somewhat irritatingly say, "Yes? Can I help you?" Thinking it was a coworker or cook I didn't know was in yet trying to circumvent the order system. I literally felt the presence of someone standing behind me, looking at me, waiting for me to turn around, only to find no one and the door wide open, the hallway empty. Occasionally when doing floor stock upstairs in the ICU, I would walk by a room and see someone sitting on a bed, staring off into space, and when I walked back by a minute later, the room would be totally empty. God knows the nurses all had their own stories that I would occasionally hear, but I can't speak to them properly. Hospitals are weird places. Liminal spaces between life and death, and lots of dramatic feelings constantly permeate the atmosphere, good and bad. But I can definitely say that I experienced impossible things from time to time. Walking home from the night shift. Up until about a year ago, I worked at a grocery chain called Stop and Shop. For those of you who aren't from the northeast of the US, Stop and Shop is like our version of Kroger. I was, and still am, a working college student. My availability was only 6 p.m. to closing, which, in this case, was midnight. Stop and Shop wasn't my favorite job. I dealt with a lot of shitty customers and coworkers, one of whom once broke into my locker and put a used tampon in the pocket of my apron, but that's a whole different story. My job was walking distance from where I lived, which made it really convenient since I didn't have a car. One Friday night, I was closing as usual with my supervisor, and we were running later than we usually did. I and my supervisor finally got the remaining customers out of the store, clocked out, and left. I left before my supervisor and began walking home. After a long, frustrating day of annoying customers, it felt great to just walk through the fresh winter air. I spent a few minutes shuffling through my phone's playlist to find a song to walk home to. My fiancée's music captivated me, prompting me to play Faith, plug in my headphones, and crank up the volume. I made my way down the main road, careful not to slip on any of the ice. One thing that is important to know about me is I'm a very anxious person, and while it's definitely a problem most of the time, it does help to make me constantly aware of my surroundings. That's why when I saw an approaching car slowing down on the deserted main road, I automatically went on high alert. The black car came to a slow stop against the sidewalk I was on, about 10 feet behind me. I immediately clutched my phone in my hand, bringing it out of my pocket. If there wasn't ice covering the sidewalk and my feet didn't hurt, I probably would have run. Instead, I opted to try and pretend I wasn't afraid, which I don't think worked, because I picked up my pace after the car stopped. It was then that I heard a man's voice call to me. "Hey," he yelled over to me. "It's cold out here. Do you want a ride?" I kept walking away from him up the street, pretending I didn't hear him, hoping he would just go away. It didn't work. A few moments later, I heard the car tires crushing the ice on the road and turned around to see what he was doing. He was driving the car in reverse. When he caught up to me, he rolled down the passenger's seat window more. He was a black man, maybe in his mid to late 30s. He looked at me, and I stopped, prompting him to stop his car as well. "Hey, let me give you a ride," he said through the car window. I didn't know what to say. I wanted to be polite, because even though I was scared, I tried to be rational. All he did was offer a girl a ride home who was walking in the cold at night. Also, with the possibility of him being a kidnapper, it was best not to piss him off on the empty street. "No, thank you," I said politely but firmly. "Do you have a long way to walk?" I hesitated for a second. Was trying to figure out what to say that would get him to leave me alone and not give away which street I lived on. "I'm okay," I insisted. "Thanks though." As I finished thanking him, I started walking again, now putting both headphones in, with the song paused. It was more of a way to signal that I was done talking to him. He didn't say anything, but I knew he was watching me walk away. I felt relieved when I got a few more feet away from his car. I heard the sound of his tires driving away. Unfortunately, the situation was only getting worse. As I started walking past the entrance of a car dealership, I saw the same car making a U-turn in the middle of the street at the corner of my eye when I turned slightly. He pulled up to the sidewalk again, this time a few feet in front of me. The man opened the driver's seat door and got out of the car. It was at that point I was actually afraid I wouldn't make it home that night. He looked at me with this weird expression on his face. He had this really focused look while trying to also look casual. It's really hard to describe. He started walking up to me. This kind of situation had never happened to me before, but I always thought of dangerous, hypothetical situations in my head. I guess thinking about those situations prepared me to an extent, because before I realized it, my phone was already against my ear, like I was on the phone with someone, even though I wasn't. When he approached me, he noticed the phone in my hand and presumably understood that someone might be aware of my current location or that I could be dialing 911. That is the only plausible explanation I can consider, as his demeanor shifted when he examined my phone. He stopped in his tracks with a worried look on his face and asked me, "Oh, are you on the phone with someone right now?" I replied, looking at him with my phone still against my face and my other hand casually in my pocket. Without saying anything else, the man immediately turned around, got back in his car, and started to drive up the street. I walked slowly at first, letting some distance grow between us, but as soon as I felt safer, I walked up the street as fast as I could without slipping. I frantically tried to call my dad, who I thought was home at the time. He didn't pick up. I tried to call my sister and my fiancée. I didn't feel like I was in danger anymore, but my adrenaline was through the roof, and I wanted to hear from someone so I would feel better. I gave up calling after I couldn't get in touch with anyone, and I just kept walking. I finally was getting ready to turn onto another street when I passed an empty parking lot and saw the same man, leaning against his car, looking over at me. "Hey," was all he said in a flat tone when I walked by. At this point I was finally completely freaked out. I didn't have my phone out anymore, so I couldn't pretend I was talking to someone again, and I was significantly closer to my house. If he decided to get in his car and follow me, there wasn't any detour I could take to try and lose him. I was on the verge of tears, and that's when I decided I had to call 911. I called 911 and told them the situation. The officer on the other line stayed on the phone with me until I got into my house. After that, an officer came to my house and asked me a bunch of questions about the man, his car, and where I last saw him. All the details I either didn't remember or were too vague. He said he would at least patrol the area for him. I'm not sure if he actually did or not, but it made me feel better at the time. From that point, I needed a ride to and from work every shift until I got my schedule changed to day shifts a few weeks later. The college semester ended, and I was planning on skipping a semester anyway, and that experience only reinforced my decision. The more I think about that situation, the more I think about how lucky I was. I was in the perfect position to be taken, but I actually used some quick thinking that de-escalated the situation. I moved in with my fiancée, and I now have a pocket knife and pepper spray for when I walk home at night from my new job. It's something to remember if you haven't called 911 yet. If you don't have anything to defend yourself against someone, either let someone know where you are or pretend that they know where you are. It could potentially save your life. I was a security officer at a hotel. Hello friend, I've never really thought about how to start this, so I'll just jump in. When I first started working for this particular hotel, I was aware of some prior disturbances, if you will. Well, my normal night starts at 11 p.m. I have an unsettling feeling about the vibe in the building that night. Little did I know later that my gut feeling would turn out to be right. Waiting for the other shoe to fall, so to speak. I cannot remember the initial time this call had come out about a disturbance on the 23rd floor. Our dispatcher, an old military vet with a gruff voice, came over the radio. I need 2 officers to the 23rd floor of the hotel for a disturbance in one of the rooms. The guests will be waiting. Unfortunately, I was not one of the 2 officers up there that night. 2 officers went up, and when they came back down, one collapsed to the floor convulsing. For the sake of this officer who collapsed, his name will be Tom, and his partner's name is Roy. When I ran to assist my fellow officer with medical bags for oxygen, he let out a yell I'll never forget, stating, "It's in the corner. It's in the corner. That room is messed up, man. It's in the corner." I yelled out, "Tom, what hurts, man? Where are you hurt?" He could not say or get the words out. Tom was then transported to the hospital, where he was analyzed overnight. At the same time, I was wondering, what was in that room? Little did I know the details to follow later. Of course, my sergeant said it was probably drug-induced and chuckled about the situation when we mentioned that something must be wrong with that room. When they went to look for the strange occurrence, everything seemed normal, and of course, they chalked it up to him being on drugs or something. This is where things get weird. He clearly had no drugs in his system, as the hotel I was at has a strict zero-tolerance policy, so if this were the case, he would have been canned well before he ever came back. When Tom came back to work, I was dying to know what had happened. Well, Roy beat Tom to the punch. Roy stated that Tom had smelled a smell of R. And I knew instantly what that meant. I'm not a paranormal expert, but I have researched enough to know this was something bad. Roy told me that only Tom could smell the smell of rotten egg. He said Tom stated he saw a cat run behind the curtain and ran toward the curtain and open it up. Tom stated to me later in confidence he felt something rush him or into him. Or through him, I guess. Tom stated he was fine until crossing the threshold of the door, and that is when Roy noticed he had become extremely pale. And well, the rest you know. The craziest thing is the doctors found nothing wrong with him. How? He was convulsing in front of me. What do you guys think? My 2 night clerk hotel stories. I work as a late night shift supervisor for a hotel on the ghetto side of town near a major highway in Louisiana. Our hotel locks its doors after dark for safety reasons. To check in, you had to do it through a window. All began in Jan 2011, when a girl I worked with had something happen to her. This girl is a lesbian and has never seen a naked man in her life. Late one night during her shift, a guy in a dark 4-door car parked sideways in front of the window. After a while, she felt the guy watch her. Then the guy was blowing kisses at her, and he was doing something to himself. You can guess what it is. She reacted with disgust and shock, then called the police to report the incident and provided them with a plate number, but they never arrived. NX, the morning manager, who is transgender, is basically a girl with a manhood. The girl asks our manager if a manhood is really like that. The manager said yes. The guy got the reaction he wanted. I came back from my 2 days off to the graveyard shift. I had no idea what was waiting for me. It was after midnight when I noticed a car with a man in a Freddy Krueger shift. It pulled in sideways in front of the check-in window. At first I thought he was waiting for someone. After a couple of minutes, I got the feeling he was watching me. Then I recalled my coworker's warning, and I realized it was the same car. I called the police. I know this guy wanted me to look at him, so I made sure I wouldn't look at him. I started to watch GNR videos. Once I start watching GNR, I don't pay attention to anything at all. I notice out of the corner of my eye he even pulled up a little more. But I didn't look at all. Then a customer in a big truck pulled up on the side of the car and blocked his view of me. So then the car left. Not even 2 minutes later, the cops showed up. It was too late. He seems to always show up after our security leaves at 2 a.m. and before 5 a.m. Over the next 2 years, he appeared in different vehicles but consistently displayed the same disturbing Freddy Krueger imagery every 4 months. One time, I called the non-emergency police from my cell phone so that the man wouldn't see me doing it when he showed up. He seems to always leave before they would show up. I learned from the city police that he had been targeting hotels for months, specifically those with checkout windows where a woman was working alone and there was no on-site security during non-busy nights. They have called him the Northside Jackoff Bandit. The last I saw him was in the summer of 2013 before I left. It was after 2 a.m., and I wasn't in a good mood with a migraine. Bandit took it to a whole new level. He got out of the car and hid behind the brick column next to the check-in window. He peeks around the corner. I saw his Freddy Krueger shirt. I realize who it was. I got pissed and got up to unlock the door. I asked him what in the hell he wanted. He told me he was in love with me. He said that I was beautiful and that he just wanted to look at me. IDK if he was jacking off. I yelled to get the hell off the property. If not, I would call the police and have him charged with trespassing, stalking, and harassment. I also told him, if you don't want us to spot you easily, stop wearing the damn Freddy Krueger shirt. What's the matter? That's the only shirt you got. Now ducking leave. I shut the door and lock it. When I returned to the checkout window, he was taking off in his car. By that point, I had had enough of the drama and nonsense at the hotel. For a long time I feared this guy because I didn't know who he was. I have had stalkers and creepers before, but I knew who they were. Once I comforted him, I realized I had nothing to fear. After I left, I was still friends with one of the ladies that worked there for another 2 years. She told him that the still showed up but not on the property, just on the road in front of the hotel. You guessed it, he is still wearing the same damn Freddy Krueger outfit. The police never caught him or figured out who he was. Although the hotels that the bandit targets have good security cameras and clear pictures of him, he has not been caught. Still nothing. Over this period the hotel did receive some creepy phone calls all the time, but not when I was there. IDK if it was a bandit or not. We were never sure. Like I always say, never a boring moment at work during the graveyard shift. Special note, if the guy had gotten out of the car and come to the window and flashed me, I would have pointed and laughed at him and said, "You are proud of that small thing." To the Northside Jackoff Bandit WHO dresses like Freddy Krueger, let's not ever not meet again. BC I will kick your ass. P.S. This wasn't my scariest experience at the hotel. It has to do with the paranormal. But that's a story for another time. My second story. One late December night in 2011, it was midnight when I got a call from the person staying in room 121. One of the features of our hotel is that the rooms are located on the outside. The left side was double rooms, and on the right side were single rooms. Our hotel was under reservation, so a lot of the rooms were out of order. Room 120 is located on the double sidewalk toward the back of the hotel. And the room above 221 was out of order due to the air conditioner not working. So I get a call from the guest in 121, but there is a loud party going on upstairs in that room. The guests can hear people talking, laughing, and some music coming from my room. I'm telling our head of security what is going on. Mr. Paul claims he made his rounds 20 minutes before but didn't hear anything. The guest claimed round about 10 minutes ago she heard people running upstairs laughing and giggling, slamming the door, and loud music. I believe she even claimed that she smelled something resembling cigarette smoke, so I got the maintenance man, who also doubled as the front desk clerk, to watch the front desk. When I hung up with a customer, I went to check the surveillance cameras, which also have mics on them. Luckily in room 221, the camera was right above it. So when I clicked on the screen to enlarge the picture, Mr. Paul and I could hear music and people laughing within the room. But no one was outside the room on the balcony, like the customer said she heard. So I and Mr. Paul figured they went back inside because they heard the customer complain somehow. So I grabbed my cell phone, and it was Paul, and I walked to the floor in the back of the hotel to go to the room. While walking to the room, we can hear the loud music in the room, which is weird because it sounds like 20s music. We both heard people laughing, it's not like they were dancing, and we smelled cigarette smoke. So we went upstairs and banged on the door. The minute Mr. Paul knocked on the door, it was like everything stopped. And we didn't hear anything else. It's like you went dead silent. We looked at each other in confusion, knowing what we heard. Mr. Paul, who also doubles as a housekeeper at night, uses his master key to open the door. There was no one in the room. The room was hot due to no air conditioning, but it was still cold outside, almost 30 degrees with a 20-degree wind chill. But the room was like almost 90 degrees Celsius. We smelled smoke outside the room, but there was no cigarette smoke inside it. We heard people in the room with the loud talking, laughing, and music. It sounded like a raging party going on when we were outside the door. We even heard it over the security camera microphone. This spooked us to the bone. Mr. Paul and I entered the room and searched it, but we found nothing. Despite the room being 90 degrees in winter, we experienced a chill down our spines and a sense of being under observation. Now I have investigated the paranormal, But this truly spooked me out. We left the room and locked the door. I missed the Paul who decided to steal it off. The customer in room 121 came outside to watch the whole thing and was so creeped out by it. She asked to be moved to another room on the other side of the hotel. Being the manager in charge that night, I did that for her without extra charge. Mr. Paul left at 2 in the morning. The maintenance man, who also serves as a security guard, was on duty from 2 to 7 until the arrival of the morning guard. Many customers around that room, including the maintenance man, claim they can hear the music. However, the only person who complained was the guest directly beneath the room. If multiple people had complained, including the maintenance man, our policy is we don't go investigate the rooms ourselves, we call the police. When the hotel owner arrived at 7 a.m., I had to explain to him what happened. He did not believe until he saw the camera footage and spoke to the guest in room 121 and read the nightly logs from the front desk and security. Mr. Paul backed up everything that happened. The hotel owner decided to keep it on the down low, and the guest in room 121, he gave her a whole week free if she agreed to sign a confidentiality agreement. As for me and the others, we already signed a confidentiality agreement when we were first hired at the hotel. And to make sure we really didn't say anything, he gave me, Paul, and the maintenance man some nice raises in our paychecks, some extra days off with pay, and some nice Christmas presents. The hotel owner, who was part of the Hindu religion, got it blessed to make double sure it would happen again. He also got a Catholic prayer release to bless it too. After that, he had the room sealed off permanently and erased all evidence of it, including the security footage. Up until the time he sold it, the hotel was the last thing that ever happened that was paranormal. I never went back there again. But Mr. Paul and the maintenance man claimed that every time they go near that room, they feel like they're being watched. So it was voided at all costs. But what still baffles us is that the hotel's manager's in-laws lived at the hotel on the other side, and they claim they didn't hear a thing. However, I can confirm with certainty that the loud music was audible to every customer occupying 15 out of the 84 rooms still in use at the time. They were the only ones that didn't hear it.